These days, cinemas are about more than just movies. They're about experiences. It's winning that Friday night bowling tournament. It's finally beating your brother in laser tag. It's date night with cocktails and a love seat upgrade. Whatever experiences you offer, you need a POS system that can keep up. With over 30 years of development, Tapos offers a massive feature set, including omni-channel food and ticket sales, embedded CRM, loyalty and membership, custom cloud-based reporting, and third-party integrations with FECs. Learn more at taposapp.com.
This is the Box Office Podcast. I'm Daniel Luria, the editorial director of Box Office Pro, the pulse of theatrical exhibition. Here in our final episode of our CinemaCon 2025 series brought to you by Tapos. And in today's episode, we are going to be going over a number of studio presentations in the prior night before the final day of CinemaCon, and then, of course, final day of CinemaCon before our second half feature segment, which will include a recording of the Monday morning panel session titled Globally Speaking, Different Perspectives, One Common Goal. That was a panel moderated by Michael O'Leary, President and CEO of Cinema United. And with the panel members, Jeff Goldstein from Warner Brothers Distribution, Alejandro Ramirez Magaña, CEO of Cinépolis, Tim Richards, the founder and CEO of View, and Mark Vian, the president of international distribution at Paramount Pictures. That is coming up in the second half of this very lengthy episode. We like to make this one a long-running time because we know a lot of folks are traveling. But now let's go right into the analysis segment, because in today's panel, we've got Chris Randleman, the Chief Revenue Officer at Flix Brewhouse and part of our box office forecasting panel. Chris, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we've also got our friend, colleague, and sometimes competitor, I don't mind saying it, Sperling, Jay Sperling Reich from Cellular Junkie. Welcome back. Always good to have you.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And of course, Chad Kenner, my partner in crime here this week at the Box Office Podcast. Chad, this is year 3 for you. Are you less tired now? Like, is it like a callus that you just get into the groove of these things?
I think a little bit. The scheduling helped us this year. I feel like the last 2 days were the heaviest. Versus that's not always the case.
It's usually a little bit front-loaded. But there's a lot to talk about here. Let's start with the Amazon MGM presentation that happened on Wednesday night. We didn't include this as part of yesterday's episode because we wanted to sleep. When things end and eat dinner. When things end at 10 p.m., it's really hard to make a deadline. So we decided to tack it on to today's episode. The presentation opening with footage from Project Hail Mary, sci-fi cross-quadrant title coming in with Ryan Gosling as the star. I found it very compelling. I know this is a title, Chris, that you've had your eye on for quite some time. How did it play for you?
It is. It played huge, beautiful, stunning on the big screen. Was so happy to finally see footage from it. It's got just the talent behind it. Of course, it's got Lord and Miller. It's by Andy Weir, the writer of The Martian. So, if anyone saw The Martian, it's kind of in that vein with some humor.
That's a really good comp, actually.
Yeah, with some really good humor mixed in. I think I mentioned Lord and Miller already, but even like cinematographer, Greg Fraser of, the Batman and Dune. And it has the special VFX team from Dune as well. So those guys usually do not sign on for something unless they really believe in it and it's a project worth doing. So everything I saw just screams like Amazon is, that's really their first kickoff film of 2026, and they're all in. That's the impression I get.
They are all in. Kevin Wilson from the distribution team going on stage and saying that there will be 14 theatrical titles lined up for 2026 from Amazon MGM. They were very upfront saying, hey, listen, building a slate takes time. We've been working to deliver fresh movies. And a quote from Kevin Wilson that I really liked was, our job tonight is to convince you our commitment to theatrical is real. And if you remember, Chad, in the preview episode of this podcast...
You literally said that.
That's exactly what I said. I said, that is what Amazon needs to show up. No one's going to come in here and walk out of an Amazon MGM presentation saying, wow, I saw 40 minutes of The Accountant 2, and say that's enough. And that wasn't the case. I mean, fortunately, Amazon MGM came with a game plan of saying, we have theatrical titles, we're ready to support you. Let's go over some of the other movies that we saw here at this presentation. I feel like I saw like 17 Colleen Hoover adaptation trailers this week.
There are many. When one opens at 50 million, you're going to see everyone jump in.
Come in. It's a good business to be in.
Everyone jump on the boat, yes.
And in the same vein, it seems like sketch comics are now horror directors. Verity, coming out in May 2026 from director Michael Showalter, is an adaptation of a Colleen Hoover novel. We saw a very brief little address, but listen, I don't run a theater. I don't buy those books. I don't know how much of a brand this is. Chris, is this an established property, kind of like Stephen King? Is it a guarantee, or do you really have to work a little harder to get this out there?
I have a wife of nearly 20 years and a 17-year-old daughter. It is absolutely a property.
Okay.
And do you know who
that's a very good course correction for me to understand.
Yes.
Do you know who really knows whether Colleen Hoover is a brand or not? The world's largest bookstore, Amazon.
Yeah.
Right.
So they really know whether people are buying these books. So that's actually an advantage that they have. And yes, it's very. But if you notice, there's a theme running through some of the things you're saying. What is the date on some of those movies? 2026, 2026, It's been the theme all week with all of these studios.
It was basically, we saw the It Ends With Us opening weekend. Let's greenlight, go, go, go. And now we have release dates. But that's good. Listen, this is the way the industry used to work. If a book sells well, let's make a movie out of it.
Yeah.
I like going back to that formula. I feel it's given us some really good movies over the years. You never know how these things turn out, right? Let's go into that big IP that Chris just mentioned a second ago, and then I want to talk about some of the other originals. Masters of the Universe, which I grew up calling He-Man, because that's what it is. We got a very early first look at some of the character designs. This is the big blockbuster swing outside of Bond that Amazon MGM has currently on its schedule. Some really good original movies. We'll talk about those in a second. But Chris, is there real potential for Masters of the Universe, or is it an 80s nostalgia piece that people have forgotten about?
No, I think there's real potential. If you've seen any of the set photos, it's in production, it's shooting right now. If you've seen the star that is playing He-Man in a pink polo button-down shirt, from what I understand, it has I might be totally off on this, but it has a hint of Barbie to it, almost like putting him in the real world.
A little bit of camp,
fun, some camp, but also very serious and true to the toys and the comics, as they mentioned. And Travis Knight has not made a bad movie yet.
I liked Bumblebee. Is that weird to accept as a grown man?
No.
That Bumblebee's a good movie. It's a good movie, right? Yeah. Is it the best Transformers movie?
I think so.
Maybe, yeah.
It's definitely the best reviewed Transformers movie by far. So Bumblebee, Kubo and the Two Strings, like he's a solid filmmaker, and he's very passionate about this property. And I think from what I saw, he's got the budget. I mean, it looked big budget, and I think it has real potential next year and in a very crowded summer of 26, but it has real potential, I think.
It's going to have to be a reality, Chris, because at this point, Amazon MGM has had Best Picture nominees, Academy Award winners in there, but a summer blockbuster, a summer tentpole, no. And if this can be the first one, I think it's a nice sort of like training wheels experience before Bond comes out in 3, 4, 5, maybe 7 years. But it's the first test of, can these guys do it at that level?
Exactly.
And this is the only title, and I think in a slate that is actually quite interesting, that fits that profile. Let's talk about some of the other titles here that are maybe a little bit more adult skewing, that are in the, let's say, $40 to $100 million total range. That's like the sweet spot of movies I like, by the way. Crime 101, that Sperling just mentioned a second ago, for me that was a standout as a genre picture that was a little bit spicy, a little bit interesting. Halle Berry, Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo in that title. Undated specifically in my notes here, unless something came in, but this is a heist movie that looks great for 2026. Chad, what did you think of what we saw from Crime 101?
Yeah, it looks exciting. I'm ready to see it.
Horrible title though.
Yeah,
I mean, is that fair? So it's not even the 101 Sperling.
So,
it's a different LA highway.
So that's a very academic name. Because of, Crime 101.
Yes, this
Crime
is how you do crime.
Yeah,
Yes.
and yet it's also a very Hollywood insider name because of the 101 freeway and the 405 freeway. The 101 freeway runs from Ventura County all the way through downtown LA. And when they showed the clips yesterday, he points to all of the crimes.
So it's a heist. Yeah, it's a heist movie basically for our listeners about someone doing robberies across a highway, but apparently it's the wrong highway than whatever's on the screen. A total of 17 people in the world will care. You're hearing from one of them right now. Chris, as someone who does not care about this, what did you think of that footage?
I really liked it. It's very direct. The director's great. He very interestingly shot. I also love the side characters, Barry Keoghan, Nick Nolte.
It's a pretty stacked cast.
It's got a stacked cast. Monica Barbaro now. Yeah. I mean, it's a stacked cast. It's visually enticing. That's all. There's a clear hook. It's visually enticing. I like its prospect. It's not going to be huge, but...
No, but it's going to play a role in the market. I mean, it's a movie you go on a date to go see. We don't get those too often.
Do you see that movie making $100 million?
And I think the other highlight from this presentation, in my opinion, was the Luca Guadagnino drama After the Hunt, starring Andrew Garfield, Ayo Edebiri,
Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts. How can I forget Julia Roberts? Yeah. And she was really good in the footage we saw, by the way. A drama about cancel culture and allegations scheduled for October 2025. Again, a movie for adults, a movie that's not built to be even an $80 million movie. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't need to be. I like when we get to see this type of movie at CinemaCon, personally. Mm-hmm. Let's move on here now to the next presentation that we have on the schedule. Of course, the Amazon MGM presentation happening on Wednesday night. And then on Thursday morning, we start with Paramount. Now, as we often do on this podcast in our preview episode, we placed bets on what Chris Aronson would show up wearing, and Chris Aronson showed up wearing a suit.
Yeah.
And you could feel the room.
There was an audible...
Everyone was like, what?
Everyone was deflated. It's like, do your trick, man.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, because he always makes an entrance. He's either flying in from the ceiling, or he's got a marching band, like for The Greatest Showman, or he gets brought in a chariot for Gladiator, and here he just kind of, now welcome Chris Aronson, and he strolls out, and you literally heard the whole audience go, oh. And he was like, oh, well, nice to see you guys too.
Poor guy. I mean, he's the only distribution executive in the world that has to put up with this. But, you know, he nails the cosplay when he does it. I think he's pretty good at it.
But then he did a Mission Impossible thing.
That was a thing, so the big stunt at the Paramount presentation was Chris Aronson rides away in like a dirt bike.
They were like electric dirt bikes.
Electric e-bikes. Right? Almost looked more like, I was like, am I at the wrong presentation? Is it Tron?
Yeah, they looked a little Tron.
A little Tron-ish, Or like, extras from a John Wick sequel that he got killed off. But then we saw like, some guys jump around on bicycles, which is fine. It's great. And always
he did have the bit of the day. Was it him with Naked Gun?
With Naked Gun. So there were two Aronson bits here in this presentation. Yes. A very brief stuntman gig with Mission Impossible theme, and then a pretty funny Naked Gun inspired intro.
That was good.
So we always enjoy, hearing from Chris Aronson. I as we often do when we talk about, before Fox, now Paramount, the studios he's been associated with in recent past. When Chris goes on stage at CinemaCon, it's kind of like when Tom Rothman goes on stage at CinemaCon. These are the sort of executives that have opinions on what theaters are doing and will provide feedback. Whether you're ready to listen to it or not, I respect him a lot for it. And he came in with notes. And I don't think they were bad notes.
He brought the receipts.
Yeah, I think we should discuss this because I think this was interesting. Chris Aronson, the head of domestic distribution at Paramount, starting the Paramount presentation not by introducing trailers, but by suggesting to theaters some ways they can improve the movie-going experience. I'll go through this list. I want to discuss it real quick with you guys. He pitched 4 to 5 trailers, no ads. I think the no ads part is going to be a hard sell for a lot of folks. But 4 to 5 trailers, that's been something that's been talked about a lot.
Our logo ended up on the screen for Flicks Brewhouse.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah.
You guys stick to the 4 to 5?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think as they were preparing for this, they emailed to double check on what trailers. Yeah, we cap our trailers at 4. We do not play any more than 4 trailers. We curate them, much like Alamo Drafthouse also up there. I think iPick was up there. But yeah, we do 4 to 5 trailers. We do have ads, but they're unintrusive. So yeah, we try to keep it clean, but we make up for it by only 4 trailers.
That was one of the points that Chris said this would really improve. And he wasn't alone. I mean, this is something that was said. I think Jeff Goldstein mentioned it. Mark Vian mentioned it in the panel you're going to hear in the second half of this episode. He also brought in concepts like daily deals. discounts maybe,
Well, you said you give people a discount on Tuesdays. Why not give it to them on Wednesdays? Unless, of course, you have every seat filled on Wednesdays. In which
That's
case,
not a bad call.
don't bother giving them a discount. That is, if they're full.
When someone who makes money out of selling tickets says, hey, maybe we should revisit how much tickets cost on Tuesday and Wednesday, it's a compelling argument. I mean, how do you react to multiple discount days at your circuit?
Well, this is where it's a little tricky. And in our MLAs with the studios, you're actually not allowed to have more than one discount day per week. Like, it's written in.
You're lucky that you have one. Remember when there were none?
Right, yeah. And that had to be fought for. And that was a struggle to get the studios to buy into Discount Tuesday. Well, now they've seen their attendance go up, their numbers go up every Tuesday. We personally do Discount Wednesday because we have a lot of large theaters around us. We're a dine-in. We're tend to be smaller screen than a 20-plex. We're usually 8 to 9 screens. So we do Discount Wednesday because we do a lot of branded stuff on Tuesday. Like we have fests like Brewfests and experiential like alt content or repertory film. So we take our Discount Wednesday and we do really well on Wednesday, and then we fight back on Tuesday against all the other people doing the discount. But yeah, to the point though, like, you're not really allowed to do more than one day. If all of a sudden everyone was like, hey, I'm going to do $5 tickets Monday
kind of like
through
it's not on us sort of situation. Like, thanks for the suggestion. I can't do anything about it.
Right. There's some things that we can do. And we have there's BOGO offers. There's all kinds of things that people do, and discounts on food, all different kinds of things like that. But yeah, you can't just go, we're going to do $5 tickets, Monday through Thursday.
Yes. And one of the other things was extending matinee
pricing.
Matinee pricing past 6 p.m.
I think until 6 p.m. is the note I took. So if you apply matinee pricing any day of the week up until 6 p.m., and this is, Tom Rothman from Sony didn't say the same thing, but Tom Rothman from Sony in the Sony presentation did say, we have to examine and revisit the cost when it comes to these things. So when we're talking about discounting, it's not just a discount day, but it's saying, well, how can we be flexible with matinee pricing? I mean, of course, if you're a dine-in, Chris, your guys are a little bit better protected in the fact that you sell food.
Yeah, our PPA, if somebody walks through the door, because we're the only brewery cinema in the world that we have a brewery on site at every single location, we're more protected because we have the alcohol sales, we've got a full dine-in menu, we've got all of that if somebody comes to the door, even if it's a $5 ticket, we're still getting all the food and beverage, much more than if somebody goes to a Regal or an AMC and is just getting the popcorn or, getting nothing sometimes.
I know when Adam Aaron, CEO of AMC, is always bragging about our PPA is, it's $7. I'm like, yeah, have you seen a dine-in PPA? It's like $35.
But you also have to factor in obviously the operations cost of that. I mean, it's a tricky equation, dine-in, as we all know here in this industry.
This one is easy for us at Flix because we have matinee pricing up until 5 p.m. every day.
So it's just 1 hour more.
Yeah.
What were his other notes?
I think things that are being actively developed, to be fair, by the industry. Things like local grassroots marketing to potential moviegoers. So not just marketing for loyal moviegoers and hitting up your loyalty program, but going to potential moviegoers, meaning the people that aren't going, grassroots marketing for that. I think that's easier said than done. Harnessing the power of social media, to be fair, after theaters missed the boat on the Gentle Minions craze, I think they got it right with Barbie, and I think they've gotten it right since.
Yeah.
I think you could say that for Gentle Minions, like, don't be scared of it, lean into it. You can definitely criticize then, but by the time we got to Barbie and the Barbenheimer thing, I think theaters learned their lesson and were like, no, it's good if 18 to 25-year-olds are posting about being excited going to the movies.
And showing up wearing pink and taking pictures.
Yeah, we should encourage that, instead of being afraid of that. So to be fair, I think we're on it. And then lastly, incentives like the National Popcorn Day incentive that just happened, where you can, for one day a week or something, one day a month maybe, you can bring your own bucket and get a bucket full of popcorn. Put it on a Monday, put it on a Wednesday, pick your day. But those little tweaks, I think, are interesting. And to be fair, a lot of theaters are actively doing that. I had lunch with your marketing team, Chris. A lot of these concepts that Chris Aronson is pitching, Flix is already doing, and a lot of your colleagues are already doing.
We've been doing this for years. So this is old hat to us by now. I know a lot of the other industry does not do it yet, or is just putting their foot into it. But yeah, for us, it's old hat. And another thing, Chris, I want to give him credit for, Chris Aronson at Paramount, is he's been a champion of, in the United States or in the domestic market, we have very rigid, like, you need to run a clean schedule for a film, right?
Yeah.
So he's been one of the first that's like, Paw Patrol, and it was mentioned in the opening remarks
by Michael O'Leary. Yeah,
like, you don't need to run Paw Patrol at 10 p.m. at night on Tuesday. Why don't we, instead of doing that, put the monkey from Neon in that still has a little juice left into it, put a $5 ticket on that, and run that at 10 p.m. Like, that at least has a prayer of getting 15 people to buy a ticket.
And you know what? At 10 a.m. or noon or 1 or 2 p.m., take the monkey out.
Absolutely.
And put 2 screens of Paw Patrol.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the exact concept that I think the whole industry needs to really move to. I hope every studio continues to move there. There's going to be always some holdouts of that, but that's the way to make it more dynamic for booking, because theaters are going to do what's best for everybody. I get and I think the fear is always between studios and theaters is an exhibition is, are they going to screw us? Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Are they going to follow the rules that they should? And, every theater owner is here to make money, and we're going to put the right films in the right spots to make money.
We share the same bucket of money. This is the thing. That can be frustrating when we don't see eye to eye, but I will give, Paramount a lot of credit in that regard as well, that I think they've been very innovative in saying, hey, you know what, we're going to discount this movie. I'm thinking of the 80 for Brady that came out.
That's the one everybody uses.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
That's a great example. They'll experiment with these things, and the fact that they'll work with you and saying, hey, you know what, you don't have to be contractually tied to playing Paw Patrol at 10:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. I think that's common sense. Not every studio executive thinks that's common sense, unfortunately.
Are we G-rated or PG rated?
We can be PG-13.
Try new shit. Try new...
Having worked for the MPA, I can tell you are now squarely at an R. No.
Yeah, I mean, just everyone needs to try new shit. Stop just doing what's always worked. We use that as a principle at Flick Set. We try new repertory programming all the time, just as a test to see, does this audience exist? Is it soon enough to show this film? We just did it with La La Land. We're is it too soon? Is it not? We put it up and sold, 1,500 tickets. It's across our circuit. You have to try new things. You have to try new deals, new discounts, new ways of doing everything. Turn over every leaf that you can, because you never know what you're going to find.
And that's actually
very cheesy, but yeah.
No, I think that's on point. That's something that Chris Aronson said on stage to conclude these remarks. He said, the time is now to turn your business upside down. So, some of these ideas are quite radical and maybe need a little bit of negotiation.
Those were his exact words?
Easy.
Yeah.
Exact words.
Yeah.
And I think that's right. And that's the value of an executive like him in this industry, in taking the stage at CinemaCon. It's not just, let's take a victory lap on all the money we made together last year. It's not, check out my trailer. It's, hey, how can we improve this?
I think that's the theme of this entire conference this year, is everybody realizes, hey, what we have, it's not working. So we have to change. We may not want to. We may not be ready for it.
I'm not sure. I'm going to push back on that, Sperling. I'm not sure we're at the point where it's fair to say that it's not working. I think, knowing the ebbs and flow of this business, we're coming off of a nightmare March that turned a ho-hum first quarter into a disastrous first quarter. And I just have to look at the tracking that we have coming up for this weekend, where, Chris, we were talking about this a second ago, Minecraft is looking to open above 100 million.
Yes. Yeah,
as we record this on Thursday.
Yeah, a week ago it looked like 75, maybe 80 would be great for it, and now it's trending in that 125 to 150 range. I mean, it's exploded in ticket sales, and it's got that Five Nights at Freddy crowd plus families that are really, for the most popular game. But to your point, though, I think that there are elements of that aren't working, and we should turn over everything and find new ways to do things. But
I'm talking more about the theme of the kind of the vibe of this year.
Yeah.
Was kind of hey, we need to try some new stuff, because this is not it's a struggle. And we need to stop struggling. And one way to do that is to change what we're doing.
Yeah. I think we had real conversations this year. The last few years, hey, great, we survived. Everyone's happy. Here's some new trailers. And let's hope we survive another year. And now it's Yeah, like things have been a struggle to your point, through first quarter, but we're about to launch, I think, into a 2 to 3 year period that's going to be exceptional. And
according to all the presentations we saw, which were all like 26 and 27 and 28.
Right. It's the first let's get back to work CinemaCon, I feel, since 2019.
It's the first normality, all the strikes are out of the way.
Yeah.
Finally, I think what happened in quarter one was the tail end of all the strike production delays and moves and all,
I wouldn't even say that, Chris. I think it was just an awful March.
Yeah.
And I just think it's that. If we have a halfway decent March, we're not having the doom and gloom conversation.
Well, and here's a litmus test, right? I've seen so many people go, well, God, 2018 or 2019 was this. I'm like, go take this schedule and put it in 2018 It's not going to do much better.
Perform.
Mickey 17 doesn't, open to $70 million in 2018.
That's a great point.
It opens to, find me one film in the first quarter that opens really all that much bigger, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
None of these films were going to be huge, massive hits in the first quarter.
But I feel very confident, not only from the slate we saw, but also just looking at how pre-sales have just been going crazy for Minecraft this weekend, that box office rally that we saw last year start in June, with even before Inside Out 2. To be fair, it was the Bad Boys sequel that came out the weekend prior that overperformed, that really launched everything in June. Right now, that recovery is happening in April instead of June. And I think that's why we're in a really good position to start this recovery now. There's going to be months that don't work. Of course that's going to happen. But I feel very confident, as critical as I have been about that first quarter, and I have been critical.
Oh, really?
I feel great about where things are headed after this week. But that's basically the preface to this Paramount presentation, which I thought it was valuable to go into, because if Chris Aronson is taking the time to say, hey, from a distributions perspective, this is how we can improve the experience, we should take it seriously. We should listen. We should discuss it. We should engage with it, because it is coming from a good faith perspective. And he backed it up with some really interesting movies coming out soon. Let's start with the first bit of footage we saw. There's a Smurfs movie coming out, which looks almost identical to all those Trolls movies. If anyone wants to say something nice about Smurfs, please go ahead.
So what was the second movie that they had?
It was SpongeBob SquarePants. But actually, the SpongeBob thing, there's an audience there. I'm too old for it, Chad. Were you a SpongeBob guy?
Not too much. I didn't have cable, so I didn't
I grew up internationally, so, Nickelodeon
I can tell you, everybody
that.
Around me, I was like, they were really going, they were like cheering when they heard the voice, because that's how, and I was like, what? That doesn't sound like anything to me.
Yeah.
And so that's when they finally revealed it was SpongeBob SquarePants, I realized, wow, I am old.
I think Smurfs and SpongeBob will serve their audience.
I'll
say
we're not that audience. We don't have to be that audience, but
we are not that audience.
It exists. It was somewhere at CinemaCon because people did get quite excited.
Yeah.
God bless them. That's fine. I am the audience, however, of Naked Gun. I am definitely the audience of Naked Gun. My favorite trailer of the entire event was what we saw from, again, if we had a little bell or a sound effect whenever an endangered genre comes on, R-rated comedy.
I'm going to have to work on that.
We have to figure that out. But anytime like an R-rated comedy or a romantic comedy comes and we see it in wide release, we really have to highlight it. I don't know if it's going to be good or bad. It was hilarious. What I saw from Naked Gun was great. Chad, what are your initial reactions?
I have such fond memories of just watching those films. Probably way too young to be watching those films, but my parents let me watch them. Sure, most of the innuendo went right over my head. But Liam Neeson playing it completely straight, like in every other movie we've seen.
I was surprised how good he is at that, like Leslie Nielsen deadpan.
Yeah,
he sells it. I mean, he is like born to play this.
Yeah,
I loved it. Sperling. I mean,
I don't want to give away.
You saw it in theaters. That's how old you are. That's not a diss, but I'm just saying.
I did. Yeah,
okay. I saw it. I also outed Chris.
I was very young, but I saw it.
We probably shouldn't have watched it, Chad and I. But you guys are a little.
I'll say this: I saw it in a theater, but I probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Let's say I didn't pay for that movie.
But did it rekindle nostalgia? Or
it did, and I thought it was very. I don't want to give away a spoiler. Should I? The one
you can.
The one
trailer's already
O.J.
out,
Simpson is addressed.
It's a different trailer.
Okay.
They released a 1-minute trailer. We saw probably a 3-minute trailer.
Yeah, we saw quite a bit.
We
saw quite a bit.
And there was a moment there where they're all like, I guess each one of them happens to, each actor on that's playing one of the characters is actually the son or the offspring of the original people in the original film. So Liam Neeson is Leslie Nielsen's
Frank Drebin Jr.
Yeah, exactly. And then they get to O.J. Simpson, and the character's just like, no.
Yeah.
I'm out.
I could not believe that they went there with that, and it was incredibly hilarious. That trailer just blew me away. It blew the roof off the place. Like, everybody was like dying laughing.
Let's move on here on the schedule. One of the movies that I am most interested in here in 2025 is the Derek Cianfrance movie Roofman. I'm a huge Derek Cianfrance fan.
He's a very, very good director.
Yeah.
Very underrated.
I rate him very highly. Like the people that know the name know there's a lot of respect to be put on that name. An alumnus of where I went to undergrad, University of Colorado, and
Blue Valentine.
Blue Valentine is one of those movie-going experiences that floored me. Floored me.
People ask why I go to Sundance every year, and I always tell this story. At 6 o'clock, I went to see the very first screening of Winter's Bone.
Oh, yeah.
And I walked I was like, who is that girl in that movie?
Right.
I walk out of that, I go back outside the theater to get back in line, and I go in to see the 9 o'clock screening of Blue Valentine.
That's a double feature.
All in the same day.
That's an all-time double feature.
I'm like, I said, I'm constantly trying to recapture. Yeah, so meanwhile, Roofman, you have a guy who's doing what seems like a genre piece, but it's very...
So he's the director with a very, I think, established sensibility, artistic sensibility. But this is probably his most accessible or appealing movie yet. Channing Tatum plays a bandit or a robber, for lack of a better term, that breaks into places but through the roof.
It's a true story. 40 McDonald's finally got caught, and he's a very kind robber. The scene that we saw shows him giving his coat to one of the McDonald's employees who's about to go into the cooler because it's cold. And then gets caught and subsequently escapes jail. Yeah.
I thought it was the right type of trailer for the movie that I want to watch, but I can't put into words. Like if someone sat down and asked me, hey, what sort of movie would you like to see more often in a theater? I'd really struggle describing it. I'd probably just put on this trailer. Roofman has been all year, but especially now, is probably my most anticipated film.
When is it being released?
October.
Yep. October 3rd.
Yep.
But then I'm trying to. What else did they have? They had.
As far as Paramount?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, another one. Actually, the first footage that they showed was Running Man.
Well, we completely lost. I was going to get there because that's our big November release from Paramount. I mean, we're talking about titles that, Naked Gun, we're rooting for. Roofman, we're rooting for. Now, there are two movies this year that Paramount is putting out that are just shooting for the stars. One of them has Tom Cruise in it. Yes, that's obvious. The other one is a little bit more of a swing, but I am very confident that it can perform. Let's talk a little bit about The Running Man. This seems like a politically conscious adaptation of a Stephen King novel from the 1980s, was it? Or was it adapted in the 80s?
Adapted in the, I can't remember what year Arnold's Running Man was.
Right.
But yes, 80s or very early 90s, yeah.
And as opposed to something like a Total Recall remake, what we saw today from The Running Man made me feel very confident that this movie has real box office potential. Chris, this is coming in a window that reminds me a lot of how Gladiator 2 played when there was a Disney movie and a Wicked movie in theaters. Are we doing a disservice to Running Man by comparing it to Gladiator 2? Is that a good comp? Or is there a bigger ceiling here?
I think it's a bigger ceiling. It also has competition. We're going to have to see how that date clears up as well, because this is another thing that we'll go through is the rest of the calendar is stacked. If you just go look at, like, I was helping someone try to find a date for a film, and the rest of the calendar is stacked. There's 3 movies.
You should have said, February 2025. Yeah. Great time to release a movie.
Exactly.
So when you were sitting down with Chris Aronson, and you said to him...
No, but on that same date, you have and we'll talk about this one, I'm sure, is Predator Badlands and Running Man on the same date.
Oh, that's the same demo.
Is the same
and
demo.
And the demo is me.
Yeah.
It's like 39-year-old men that like these movies.
Yeah. Double feature.
Yeah, it's a good double feature. I need to pay the babysitter.
So I do think there's an issue there. Like there's one, push up a week. There's one push probably not back because that's on Halloween is the week prior.
But that's a good observation.
And you can't open on Halloween. So we'll see like what actually happens with release dates because you always get some movement in the fall.
And Running Man moved back. It was originally supposed to, I think, open in the exact same weekend that Gladiator 2
It was supposed to be
the
Gladiator and or Gladiator 2 and Wicked combo. It was on
that
same
the
day.
same thing. It was a rerun. And then you had, instead of Moana 2, you had Zootopia 2. We were ready to just say, okay, that's the benchmark. It's a copy-paste from last year.
Well, and Running Man moved first, and then Disney dated Predator Badlands right on top of it. So, we're coming in, which is great. That's like the greatest sign that we have real competition.
Yeah.
There is no safe date where you can just go take your movie and hide it, where you're the only movie to open that weekend. That's gone right now.
Well, how long did we spend from 2020 to 2025 complaining that the tentpole of the quarter strategy is unsustainable?
Right.
And now that we actually have movies coming out starting this weekend, it feels like we're beyond that.
We are. I mean, you're hitting every single week. There's going to be competition. You look at May, like. There's competition every single
June
week.
and July.
May is the last film that they showed here, Mission Impossible.
Yeah, let's go into that. I think that's
which
a good
is
segue.
clearly the end. I think Tom Cruise coming out and is that a spoiler?
No, that Tom Cruise is in Mission Impossible.
But he was here, which I think everybody knew he would be here.
Right.
But it is something notable in the fact that post-pandemic, Tom Cruise has attended 2 Cine Europes. But this is his first post-pandemic CinemaCon.
No. He attended one other one as well.
Yeah. I think 21. Like he came out like.
We had him in the August CinemaCon where it was just like 13 of us in a room.
I believe so.
Saying like, oh, Cuomo, we hate that guy. And then Tom Cruise was there too.
No, I'm almost sure he was at one. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But I'm sorry. Yeah.
I know I saw him at the first 2 Cine Europes after the pandemic. I can't remember seeing him here. I mean, listen, it's a blur. One year extends to another here. But the fact that he's here this year, I think, is very notable. And I will agree with Sperling. What we saw, more than I expected. We saw a decent amount of footage from Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. The way Tom Cruise spoke about this movie seems like it's his last time playing this character.
He literally thanked every director.
Everybody.
He went all the way back to
every producer.
Every studio head at Paramount from the beginning.
He shouted out General Cinema in the thank yous. I mean, it's going back a while. Now, yes, I think that's the situation now. What happens if this thing makes 800 million worldwide?
Well, everybody asks that same question. Oh, if John Lennon had lived, would the Beatles have gotten back together? The answer is clearly yes, they would have at some point because the money's too good. So the question is, 10 years from now, does Mission Impossible get reignited and he's no longer the star, but and I know they tried to pull that off once before and it didn't work, but where he's like the Q, so to speak, where he's,
I think that's what, assuming he lives through this one, maybe he doesn't live through this one, but if he does live, I think that would be, I can't imagine that David Ellison's going to buy Paramount and, Skydance is going to buy Paramount. And
we're all done.
Yeah, we're good.
We're all done with this,
I think it goes to...
You want some Paw Patrol movies, Ellison? We got that.
Oh, right. It goes to a Glenn Powell. It goes to somebody... They tried to do it once.
With
Jeremy Renner. That was never going to work, and I don't know why they thought it would.
They tried to do that with, 4 series or something. Like, they tried to do it with that. They tried to do it with Jason Bourne. They tried to do it, We tried to make... Jeremy Renner, fantastic actor. But
not the right person for that role.
No, he's not the lead in those roles. So, but I think that it lives on. We all know that. Like IP lives on.
Yeah, forever.
And I don't think they'll very quickly transition.
Haley
to
Atwell
else.
could take it.
Haley Atwell.
I think that'd be great. It's a great shout, Chad. Yeah, I think there's a lot of directions the Mission Impossible series can go. I think that's going to get put on a shelf until the Skydance acquisition clears or doesn't. I think it's one of those all right, Amazon bought James Bond. We're not touching this until we figure out what happens creatively. We are coming off of a disappointing Mission Impossible movie at the box office. And I also thought the movie itself just wasn't great.
Oh, I loved it.
You like the last Mission Impossible?
Like our colleague Russ Fisher, I'm a huge fan of
You're completely... I like all these movies.
It was one of the best ones of the
There were magic tricks in it. Listen, I want something different. And to be fair, I don't think I'm alone because they retitled it.
Yeah.
Well, the title, it had so many, bad release date, bad title.
Yeah.
Like too long of a title. I had to check so many times to make sure I was spelling it right.
Reckoning?
Yes.
Yes. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to get that.
And he sandwiched it in the wrong release date right before Oppenheimer and Barbie. I think it's headed for the biggest opening that it's had in the series. I think it'll be $70 million plus. The thing I think that helps drive that is Disney's Lilo and Stitch is on the same date. I am very bullish on Lilo and Stitch for all the metrics that came out with the trailer views and everything. I think that movie could open well above $100 million. You pair that with Mission Impossible, if it's marketed as the final one, which I think it will be. You put those together, I think you get maybe a record Memorial Day weekend.
$200 million weekend.
By the way, last time we had Chris on this podcast, he said we're going to get a record Thanksgiving weekend. And we got a record Thanksgiving weekend, Chris. I think Lilo and Stitch is probably going to be, I don't know if it's fair to compare it to something like Inside Out 2, but it is going to play a similar role in the sense that it's going to be that early family audience title that gets people excited.
Yeah, I'd go more to I almost compare it to Moana 2, I think is an easy comparison because it was destined for streaming before they decided to not put these things on streaming and destroy their value. And that, if you throw these on a big screen and in theaters, that you can make $1 billion pretty easily.
Or you could make, $200-300 million. And then guess what? You know where it's going to go later? On your own streaming service.
Right.
Having already made $300 million.
Right.
Oh, what a shame. I mean...
Exactly. And they and to their credit, they've done that how many times now in the last year? I mean, they took Alien Romulus.
Yeah.
Made what, 350 or
it's a great performance that we wouldn't otherwise have gotten.
Right. So they get $350 million for that, betting on theaters again. They get $1 billion for betting on it with Moana 2. I think they're going to get somewhat close, maybe not that close, but they'll get a lot of money for Lilo and Stitch. They're going to get a lot of money for Predator Badlands. Yeah. These were all streaming destined films when they started.
What about Elio? This is the Pixar animated film, if I'm not mistaken. Is it Pixar?
Yeah, it is Pixar. We saw some footage from it. I'm at a weird point with Pixar where it looks like the sequels are doing well. I can't remember the last Pixar original to just nail it. Was it Coco, the last Pixar original, that got things right?
As far as box office or just as a film?
I mean, both. Oh, no, as a film, Soul was great, Turning Red, but they didn't even get a theatrical release. Yeah. I mean, the last Pixar original to be a theatrical cultural event is a while. Soul is one of the best animated films I've ever seen. Turning Red is one of the best films of the last 10 years.
Luca's great.
Strong movies, but we haven't seen Coco. That in the culture as a theatrical event.
Right. It's been pre-pandemic. I think Coco was the last original that really blew the roof off, box office and critics-wise. I mean, Elemental did well. It started off very slowly, $25 million opening weekend, and then made $500 million globally. I mean, that's it found its audience, and I think that was the first thing that was the key that told them let's go back to theatrical and go back to windows and not tell people when we're going to throw these things up on Disney Plus, and that is the way forward on this stuff.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I would agree that was the
turning point.
Yeah.
What did you think of the Elio footage we saw, Chad?
Good. It looks fun. It looks cute.
The 3D looked amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually really liked it.
Normally, I'm
3D. I'm not a 3D person either.
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be an interesting performer here in the summer season. Opening 1 week after the How to Train Your Dragon live action film. Originally, they were showing the same weekend. I'm glad that Disney moved off of that date. But Chris, is that a good thing that we have two options? Or are we cannibalizing the same demo?
No, I mean, I think two options works. Elio is probably a younger audience than How to Train Your Dragon. So I think they can both exist. But again, things, like we talked about before, things are going to get tight. You're not going to get 3 weeks clear of a similar film anymore. That's going to be gone. Yeah. And especially in the summer, you're going to get stacked against everybody. And,
Rather than look at it as a negative, though,
right?
Maybe look at it as a positive. When I went to see, I can't even. I think Gladiator 2. I saw the lines for Wicked and was like, "Oh, people are really going to see that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it must be like really doing well. It must be really." And yes, you could look at the box office, but going to a cinema and seeing the lines for Wicked, it's like, oh, maybe I should see that movie.
I've been pushing that message whenever I do like press appearances that having two tentpoles released in the same weekend didn't used to be a meme. It was just normal.
It happened.
Now we have to find like a meme or an angle with it. No, let's not will that into existence anymore. It's just a regular weekend.
Yeah, I'm old school. I go way back to the days of when you had The Patriot and Perfect Storm like fighting against each other on the same weekend, and everyone thought The Patriot would be
movies,
because of Braveheart had come out a few years earlier, and
don't discount Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden Clooney and Wahlberg come out of nowhere with Perfect Storm and battle it out. I love those, and the thing we're getting into more now is where you have movies that complement each other, right?
Yeah.
Gladiator and Wicked are not competing for the exact same crowd. Barbie and Oppenheimer are not competing for the exact same crowd. Lilo and Stitch and Mission are not competing for the exact same crowd. So movie-going momentum, it's the reason we go to movies, right? If you're in a crowd, you feel that energy. They talked about it today. You feel that energy if you go by the box office or you drive by your local theater and you see those lines, you see the full parking lot. I truly believe that a human being sees that and goes, I want to be a part of that.
A lot of that is happening on social media now, and this goes back to one of Chris Aronson's points on improving the cinema-going experience, which is how can we harness social media creatively? And that FOMO isn't just walking by a theater. It's also seeing a social media feed. Everyone's taking these selfies with the lobby activations, and I'm not, right? And it's creating a talking point culturally beyond all of the fragmentation and clutter that we have in the media is really difficult. And when we get those opportunities, I think it's great. And there are a number of titles that can do that in this Disney slate. Let's talk about some more highlights here. I found the Tron Ares footage interesting. I am a big Daft Punk fan. So I was a little disappointed when they didn't come back for this title, but what was prominently featured was a 9 Inch Nails soundtrack.
Absolutely. Now, I think Daft Punk is done, right?
Yeah,
they're
out.
They're done.
Away.
Yeah, they're like retired. But yeah, if you're going to get a replacement for Daft Punk, which that Tron, what is it, the last Tron? I cannot remember the name of the last Tron.
Legacy?
Yeah,
Yes.
Tron
Tron
Legacy has.
yeah.
Whatever you think of the film, that score is incredible.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's an amazing score. This 9 Inch Nails score sounded amazing. I love the visuals. I'm a big Tron fan. I'm a big Disney live action fan. I loved it, personally.
I tell you what any of those films were about. I can't remember what those films were about, but I could tell you they all looked great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
even in the 80s, they looked
that
amazing.
neon aesthetic and HDR is going to look fantastic, I think, in any theater. I'm excited. Really, the drawing point for me is 9 Inch Nails. Chad, what's your appeal to the Tron Ares?
Yeah, I've always been a fan of the franchise, and with Legacy, I was among the people that really enjoyed that and was hoping that storyline would continue, so I'm glad they're bringing it back.
Yeah.
Jeff Bridges back.
Jeff Bridges back. Always a pleasure to see him in a movie. Not quite as old as Jeff Bridges is the mythical battle warrior, the Predator. But the Predator is coming back in Predator Badlands coming out in November. I am a massive fan of the straight-to-Hulu title, Prey, that came out a couple of years back. So the fact that we have a sequel to that with the same filmmaker coming out in November called Predator Badlands makes me excited. I mean, the Predator franchise is something that's been retooled and remade and rebooted poorly forever. But the one guy that got it right is the guy that's directing Predator Badlands. Prey is the only great Predator sequel. I think I like Prey better than Predator.
Yeah, Prey is very good. Daniel Trachtenberg, who's the director, is fantastic. I know too much about this one that I cannot say.
All right,
so
you gotta stick to that NDA, man.
It's not even. I'm not NDA. I just don't want to spoil it for anybody. But I know the hook to the movie, and I know like where it's going, and it's really cool. Like it's pretty kick-ass. So that's all I'll say for now. But I like it. I don't think it's so much world building. I think it's actually pretty straightforward. That's all.
That's all I need to know. I'm excited.
I do not want to get in trouble for revealing too much. Yeah.
If it can play the role for me as a moviegoer that Alien Romulus played, where I'm going to show up, I'm going to get the extra large soda, And even though I have to pee 20 minutes in, I'm not going to get out of my seat.
Right.
And the entire movie, I'm like, man, I really have to go to the bathroom, but I'm not. If it can do that, I'm good. And Alien Romulus did that. I have a feeling, having seen Prey from the same filmmaker, that there's a potential to deliver a similar experience here.
Do you think there will be any confusion with this particular movie, Badlands, Predator Badlands, and the Bruce Springsteen film, which clearly, I mean, Badlands, I think, is even on Nebraska.
I thought you were going to mention Terrence Malick's Badlands, which is actually one of my favorite movies. And I was like, no, man, I think there's very little Terry Malick here.
Wait, you're not calling it like the movie Nebraska or
There's
Badlands?
already a Nebraska movie. Yeah. I mean,
I know.
With another Bruce in there. Let's talk.
Bruce Dern.
Let's talk about that title on the Searchlight part of the schedule.
Actually, that one still is 20th Century. That was interesting.
That wasn't even Searchlight. It's still a 20th Century
it had the 20th
title.
Century logo. It was in the 20th Century portion of the presentation. I don't know why or what the specifics of that
So
are.
Bob Dylan is old enough to get the Searchlight
Bob Dylan got the Searchlight
treatment.
treatment. This one gets the 20th Century treatment. And just very quickly, as we hit on all these 20th Century movies, I think we talked about it at the beginning. We've been looking for that replacement for Fox, right? Ever since Disney bought 20th Century Fox, there has not been a lot of output. And until recently, until even last year with Kingdom, there was not a lot. But if you guys look at anything that's been signed lately and what they've been doing, and Steve Asbell, who is fantastic as the lead of the studio, they are like picking up so many titles. They just got that one with Leonardo DiCaprio and Scorsese and The Rock. They got another Scorsese and Leo movie, and they picked up a ton of other stuff. They are ramping, and then in addition to more Alien, more apes, like more everything.
We've said this in the podcast. Our colleague Ross Fisher has been very, very bullish and positive on the direction that 20th Century Studios has been going. And I have to echo that. They've been making the type of movies that I grew up watching.
Right.
And great versions of those.
They're almost like recreating Touchstone. Like,
yes.
It's like...
That's what I thought they were going to do, like when they purchased the thing. And then they just, a pandemic got in the way. But still... I like the fact that they're doing that.
I think that Kingdom, Planet of the Apes, and Alien Romulus really kicked off the green light, I think, for them. I mean, they were doing stuff already, but, Steve Asbell's leadership there and his taste and everything, who now he's famously been outed by Seth Rogen as the executive. Even though Steve, I think, says, like, well, I didn't exactly say that, but Seth Rogen was like, he's the guy that said, what was the quote? Like, he's like, I came here to make good movies, and I feel it's like my job to ruin them. When he was years ago, when he was like a younger executive. So, but through their, through what they're doing, I love what they're doing. They're picking up really cool projects and like almost recreating like the Crimson Tides and the Gone in 60 Seconds and the Pretty Womans and all those and Armageddons, and I think you're going to get more of that like Disney live action National Treasure type, like all that like prestige stuff mixed with like popcorn movies, all the things that we used to love Disney's Touchstone Pictures for. So
I'm nothing but ecstatic about the direction where 20th Century Studios is going.
But Deliver Me From Nowhere. Sorry,
let's
interrupted on that part.
Let's bring that up because that is something that we saw.
Isn't 20th Century Studios? I mean, granted, they ended with this, but the movie that shall not be named.
Ash and Fire.
Yeah, Ash and Fire.
Yes,
I don't know if we're allowed to talk about.
No, we'll talk about Avatar at the end of the episode. Because that's what they obviously CinemaCon 25 was going to close with an extended look at footage from Avatar. Fire and Ash. But before we get there, let's talk about Springsteen because there is, I think, sleeper hit potential here to overperform. Chris, is there a wide appeal here, or is it a dad movie?
Yeah, I think the Springsteen is the wide appeal. I think it is a dad movie, of course, as well. I'm not a Springsteen fan. I respect him and like a lot of his songs, but I'm not a Springsteen guy. So I think there's a wide appeal. More so, my question is you take James Mangold versus Scott Cooper, right?
Yeah.
That's more the question. James Mangold is
much.
undoubtedly more mainstream. Scott Cooper's a little bit more indie, right? Great director too. So, but if he nailed it more mainstream, and actually the fact that they have it under 20th Century, I don't know if there's like another technical reason for that, but usually they would slide that up into the 20th Century brand if it's going to be bigger. They think it's going to be bigger. So, I mean, if Bob Dylan movie can do 80 million, domestic. I mean, this could do well over 100.
Yeah,
You know,
I think it's a really
And it's
good show.
about, I mean, everybody I've ever taken to a Springsteen show has not been a Springsteen fan when they
Dude,
went
how
in.
many shows have you been to?
But they
you just
are when
taking,
they
like,
leave.
Like, can I go?
Yeah,
Not
take-
only-
take us.
I'll say this, not anymore, because now tickets are like $500 face value. That's why I didn't go. It was cheaper to go see Springsteen in Barcelona than it was in the US.
Well, maybe
Makes
that's why
sense,
so many
yeah.
people went.
That said, it's about a time in his life where he had done all the 70s stuff, all the Born to Run stuff, and that's, he then decided to go and make this album he was just doing demos, and he decided that would be the album. It would just be him and a 4-track.
There's an audience that I'm not in tune with that is definitely underlying here. I think, as Chris says, I think there's a real overperformance potential here.
Well, to your point, I don't know anybody who's only been to one Springsteen concert.
Yeah.
Usually, if somebody's been to a Springsteen concert,
You go to a couple?
They go to they're fans from that point. They go to multiples. Yeah.
And this is just taking a slice of his life in that moment in time where there was a question of what's he going to do. He just released a double album, and now he's releasing.
I'm willing to go, and this is what we always say here. It's something that Jackie Brenneman, our colleague here in the industry, would say for many years. Movie going begets movie going. Because I went to see A Complete Unknown, I know and I remember that I like this type of movie.
Mm-hmm.
I like Bob Dylan. I do not care about Bruce Springsteen. But I went to go see A Complete Unknown and I had a great time. That means I'm going to buy a ticket to see this movie deliver me from nowhere when it comes out, even though I have no association with the artist whatsoever.
What do you think of the title, though? I can't remember it.
Terrible.
I can't remember it.
Title. Yeah, it sounds like a horror movie. But that's something for someone else that makes more money than I do to fix. Let's go to another 20th Century Studios title, James L. Brooks, attending CinemaCon. It was great to see him on stage.
Yeah.
And defending a 45-day window. We didn't hear that too much. I really expected more filmmakers to go up there and say, hey, I'm with you guys. Pull a Sean Baker. It was really only James L. Brooks.
Yeah, I think there's a line to walk there, right? I mean, the studio is flying them in, probably private or whatnot.
So James L. Brooks is staying at the Best Western 3 miles away is what you're telling me?
And that's going to be his next movie. Best Western from director James L. Brooks.
No, James had the floor. I think James is a legend, and I think he can say whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Good for him.
Yeah, good for him.
And I like the fact that they didn't talk about they were naming all of his movies, broadcast news.
It wasn't
terms of endearment.
It wasn't the retirement reel.
The Simpsons.
Yeah.
No, but listen, Ellen McKay seemed interesting to me. Chad, were you on board with what we saw from this upcoming movie?
Oh yeah. Great cast. It's my kind of film. So yeah, I'm there opening weekend.
Yeah, it's not going to be a huge box office behemoth. It doesn't have to be either.
No. I think it'll do just fine. It's obviously a lower budget movie. It's not this is not a $50 million movie. I don't think it's probably in the lower range of budget.
Which is exactly what you need.
Right.
Yeah.
You need
when you spend $150 million making a movie like this and go, oh shucks, it only made $30 million.
Right.
And you're like, well, yeah, it was only ever going to make $30 million.
Right. I think they're smart about their budgets. This is another movie, too, that it will have a long life, right?
Yeah.
I loved what we saw. It'll do well enough in theaters. It will do well on PVOD. It will do well when it hits Hulu down the road, and it will have a long shelf life, I think. So I really enjoyed it, what I saw. And Jamie Lee Curtis was, I thought, great in it. So was Woody Harrelson in it. And also, we didn't mention, but Jamie Lee, it was great seeing her and Lindsay Lohan out there for Freaky Friday. Which I think will be a Freakier Friday, which I think will be a big hit in August. I think that's
the perfect time to release that movie.
Yeah.
Well, didn't The Parent Trap also come in the late summer? This is going back into what was it? Well, early 2000s.
When she still had freckles. Yes.
Yeah, no, those movies do well. It's got the Disney branding behind it. I mean, Disney's got the best marketing guy, in amongst the major studios. Assad there is genius, I think, and just great. So I think that they will market the hell out of this movie, and it will do very, very well. It's great. I love that they're making these types of movies again. And making these, and it's a great one to have.
And by the way, when they're out of theaters, at some point in the future, after they've made box office, they can all live on.
On Disney, they cracked the code. I mean, I'm thinking back to that 2021 CinemaCon in August, where Disney really wasn't on the side of exhibition, and just 4 years later, it's probably the one studio that brings in the longest window, introduces the type of movies that are cross-quadrant tentpoles, comes in and makes an appealing movie for audiences like A Complete Unknown, can come in with genre fare like this Predator Badlands. They're doing a little bit of everything. I know it's lame to say, hey, the biggest studio in the world is doing a really good job, but they kind of are.
They're doing a great job. And they're not doing it just out of the goodness of their heart, right? Why are they doing this? Because it makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's the right way.
It's almost like you'd think they had a business model that worked prior to streaming in the pandemic.
Basically a 3-tiered stream of revenue for a film. It goes to, which I have never, this is probably a whole nother podcast episode, but I have never understood the haste to get something to streaming. Because theaters have a shelf life for the movie, right?
Yeah.
PVOD has a shelf life, essentially. Once it hits SVOD or whatever we're calling it now, once it hits there, it's there forever. Forever.
Yeah.
It never has a life after that. Like, the only life, there is no more DVD sales except for, the hardest of the hardcore that buy physical media still. But once a film hits, that's why I don't get why Universal is so hell-bent on, well, I know. I know why they're so hell-bent. Yeah.
We know why.
And he said it. He goes, the more profit we make, the more, of course. If you put it earlier, yes, you get more profit immediately.
What's the parent company of NBC Universal?
Comcast, yes.
Oh, and what do they do? What business line are they in? Cable TV?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. It tracks. I mean, if I was in the cable TV business, I would also desperately be trying to find a way to be relevant.
And to be clear, Universal, I think, had the best presentation of anyone. I think I loved I know I wasn't here to talk about this one. I love their presentation. I love their slate that's coming out. It's ridiculous.
Chris, I'm going to push back on that.
They only had two films.
No, Universal was too many sequels for me. It was Sequel Town. I think they're going to have something very compelling in a couple of years. I was let down by that slate.
I was on the money side. I'm enthralled by it because
but you do have a financial interest. Yes, you do.
I think Jurassic Park will make some money.
The guy that books movies for a cinema circuit likes that there's a lot of good popular movies.
I love you have. I mean, just in 2026 alone, Super Mario Brothers 2.
Yeah,
you've got Minions 3, and then you got Shrek, which could be just an absolute.
Shrek's gonna be a monster.
Just a unintended monster.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be.
I mean, you talk about global box office of those 3 movies alone. You're talking about $4 to $5 billion, probably.
I mean, there's some very bright days ahead.
$1.5 billion. Shrek might be $2 billion.
And it's gonna be. It would be brighter if you didn't have a dumb exclusivity window the way that they do.
Well, let's see how. I think to your guys' point before, right? This is the first year where it's like the gentle pressure is being applied back because theaters now have. We've done the streaming experiment, right?
Yeah.
We've done it. Like everyone burned massive mountains of cash chasing the streaming carrot. And a lot of them, have been devastated by chasing that carrot. So what are they, this is bad language, probably not cussing, but what are they going to do? They're not going to go and just go, well, we're putting everything just on streaming and we're done with theatrical. They're not doing that because to go back to the original point of this, they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing this because they make a lot of money with theaters still. Yeah. And it promotes their product once it gets on streaming. Let's see where this conversation is at the end of 2026, once we've had a robust, great, insanely good box office year. Let's get to the end of 2026 and then see what the conversation's like.
Absolutely. And I'm very curious to see what those cable subscription numbers look like at the end of 2026 and what that box office looks like at the end of 2026, because maybe that's a little bit of fact that we need to push some people in the right direction.
And I give and last thing on this, I give the studios a lot of credit too, because they're fighting in some levels with if they own a linear network or if they have other things like that is not doing well, or there's other ways that they have to boost their profitability and everything. So I get it. Everyone's just testing this out and let's see where it ends out.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the other titles here on the schedule. We did get one announcement of a Searchlight title, The Roses, scheduled for Labor Day weekend, inspired by the hit book, The War of the Roses.
And the hit movie.
The hit movie, The War of the Roses. Now, this is an adult-leaning comedy. If Black Bag can do as well as it did in 3 weeks, I'm excited to see what The Roses can do with a longer exclusivity play.
If you want to feel really old, like maybe a month ago, I came across the original press kit for The War of the Roses, starring Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner.
Oh, man.
Wow.
And
Nice.
so when I saw they were remaking this, I was like, oh, God.
Oh, but it looked fun.
It looked
It looked great.
It looked
Yeah.
fun, but it also made me feel like, oh my God, they're remaking movies that like I worked on when I was like
Now,
you were just
Chad and
coming
I are
up,
from
yeah.
a generation that you're not from Sperling. I'm not familiar with the IP here,
No,
but it was like appealing to me. Did you know about this stuff?
I've not read the book, but I've seen the original film
Yeah.
and really enjoyed
the
that.
chandelier played a key role in
Yes,
the original film.
it did.
They
And
kind
there
of
was a call out to that.
There was a call in
Yeah.
the footage. We saw a chandelier. In the
It
film,
looked
yeah.
like a good remake of this story,
Yeah.
though, and
I
It
would
was
again.
fun.
I need date movies. I need date movies in this
this
time of my
would
life.
be a good one.
And there were a lot of date movies in the Disney presentation, which is weird to say, but like very much so. And this is one of them.
And the coolest thing is you guys saw, or we all saw that trailer and the footage, and we liked it. It was funny, and it's releasing on Labor Day weekend, which is usually a dead weekend.
That's a great weekend for something like this.
That tells
yeah.
you how like the competition is heating up. The space for film is, and to get a date that works or is open is, hey, you have to take what's viable, and even Labor Day weekend is becoming a viable place to put a movie that has a great trailer and might be pretty damn good.
Well, let's talk about slightly bigger movies here on the schedule because we have 2 remaining Marvel Cinematic Universe titles coming up this year.
Do we have to?
If you heard Sperling muttering in the background, to be fair, I'm also muttering in the background here. Listen, I'm not in the bag for these things. But we all need them to perform in a let's still have a job perspective. So we do have to talk about Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four in a can this break the cold streak of post-Avengers titles, not Spider-Man or Deadpool, at the box office? Because we come in with expectations from the MCU, and I don't think they've been fulfilled by the slate of titles after Avengers. I see Thunderbolts, and I see superheroes that nobody knows about.
Yeah, but
I do know about Fantastic Four, but I also know that has never really been a great IP to work with.
No, it barely worked as a comic book, in my opinion. You have basically a character made out of rocks. I don't really...
That is literally what it is. It's rocks, man.
But I think nobody knew who Iron Man was. I remember going to see Iron Man in 2008. I was like, what is this guy
But
doing?
we're at the point where nobody knows who these guys are, but now they're not showing up either. Chris, help us out here. Can we feel a little bit more confident about these movies that we might personally not want to watch, but that we really want other people to watch?
Yeah, I'll be the more sunshine on this one. So Thunderbolts, I don't care what it opens to. It'll open fine, but if it's a good movie, which I hear it is a good movie, and it's their first really reset after, like, everyone knows Captain America, Brave New World was troubled, and had multiple title changes and multiple date pushes, and multiple other movies that were kind of produced during the pandemic strikes had the same issues. This is the first one. Thunderbolts is the reset after they've kind of regrouped and got their stuff
And it looks
together.
like they're setting Thunderbolts up as like the first.
Yes.
Like, okay, if we get this right, we can actually kick off all of these storylines from here, because it's like, oh, the Avengers are dead, and now you guys, like the second grade, you're not even you're like a kindergarten Avengers.
Right.
But we'll take you just because they're dead. But it looked like they were setting the storyline up to be like the return of the Avengers.
Yes, I think that's exactly what they're doing. I think they seem confident in it, right? I think I can read, the studios pretty well when they're confident or not confident in something. And I get the sense that they're confident in this one. And yes, to Daniel's point, it's a harder sell. These characters are not nearly as well known. And if you haven't, watch the streaming series like Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I'm sorry, Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Do you even know who Julia Louis-Dreyfus is playing in this, and
I have
why?
No idea.
Why is Kurt Russell's son in this movie?
Yeah.
But I think that this will reset it. It's a lot of fun. They went a lot more practical on this one as well. I think it has a good budget. It's not like you're not getting these pandemic overruns where it's like a 250, whatever the reported budgets are, right? It's not in this crazy. It doesn't need to make, I think, $700 million to be a successful film. Like, it can have a lower ceiling and be fine and be a kickoff. All it needs to be is a good movie.
And you know what?
It's a good movie. That's all it needs to be.
Nobody knew who the Guardians of the Galaxy were.
Not at all.
Yes,
yeah.
That's a good
And
one.
that's
yet,
my favorite Marvel movie.
Yeah.
And so it went from who are the Guardians of the Galaxy to let's do 3 of these, they'll all make $1 billion.
Right. And I have to say, I'm a Marvel fan, but I sort of fell off at a certain point. I think in some of the streaming series that you mentioned.
Yeah.
But with Thunderbolts and the footage that we saw today, I'm like, okay, this feels like old Marvel that
Well,
in a
like
way
fun.
that I enjoyed. That was fun.
Looked like a lot of fun.
What about the Fantastic Four, though?
Fantastic Four, I think that they are supremely confident about that one. It was a pretty quick production. They got through it, and they seem to be very, very confident about that one. I personally love the footage that we saw today. I think it's different. It has a hook, like it's the period, it's a period piece as well.
Yeah, that's what I like.
I like that too.
So there's the hook of that. It's not just more of the same. I think Disney's or Marvel's biggest task is to redraw back in a wider audience, right? Because we're 30 film. How many films and shows?
I lost count.
Yeah.
So let's say we're 50 films and shows into the MCU. How do you attract a new person? Like, how do you attract my father that's 73 years old, and how do you get him to come to the theater, or how do you get somebody that's never watched a Marvel movie to jump in now?
Right.
I think that that being a period piece, that being what it is an easy way to get new people to jump in. I think there's fresh jump in spots, and then once they get to Doomsday, which they did briefly mention, you get to that, and then you've got 7 hooks going, right? You got the original X-Men, you got all the stuff like that, and you got Robert Downey Jr.
I'm an example of that.
Ones.
Listen, I don't know what a Thunderbolt is. I don't care. But I know who Galactus is.
Right.
I know who the Silver Surfer is. I know who the Rocksman is. And I'm a little bit more interested in that movie.
Except his name is actually, I believe, The Thing, not The Rocksman.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
And to be honest, I don't know what the other, but they all have superpowers. One is a flame on, flame off, right? That's it.
Yeah.
Fireboy and Rocksman and the Invisible Lady and Stretchy Boy. I love all those guys, and I am happy to pay a $30 premium ticket to go see it. But my doubt here is beyond that. How much is writing after it? And it seems to me a little bit rushed in this era of Marvel movies to go from all this to, by the way, we have another Avengers movie in 26. And where we get in trouble in this industry is that we see Captain America on a presentation screen or on a release calendar, and we say, oh, the last one did this, without sitting down and saying, well, wait a minute, this is probably going to be a very different movie.
Right.
And we have to be very careful about the next Avengers movie, because we're all going to say, well, pre-pandemic, this Avengers movie, all that momentum that the last Avengers movies had,
it had
very different.
It had
than the momentum
17 years of it had 11 years worth of momentum. Think about it. It had from 2008 to 2019.
Yeah.
That's a long run.
It earned every bit of Endgame and Infinity War. And if you watch it, I always go back to if you just were coming into that cold and you see a Norse god show up in the middle of a big technologically advanced state in the middle of Africa. Yeah. And he's got a raccoon on his shoulder and a tree with him.
A talking tree, no less.
Yeah, and a talking tree that can only say one word, basically. You would think this is the craziest thing, but when you watch that movie...
The way you describe it sounds awesome. It's unfortunate that the movie isn't as good as your description.
But you watch that and they're they at least earned that. They're it didn't feel unearned when they got there. I think that's their job now is you have to earn back. And I think this is the start of it. If Thunderbolts is good and Fantastic Four is good, I think people will come back.
Feels like the first moment in a while where they are building to something and they have a clear path in mind.
Right. And I do think that they got, there was a lot of production issues. The previous Disney regime that we talked about, before Bob Iger came back in, they were blasting out I think the marching orders were get as many shows on Disney Plus as you can. And if you're Kevin Feige and you're doing the movies and then you're overseeing shows and then you've got, God knows how many projects cooking at the same time, how do you quality control that?
You don't.
No, it's
You
impossible.
You can't. You even look at a studio like even like A24. Like they're starting to ramp up their schedule, and there's some quality control issues, right?
Yeah.
Because they have a much bigger slate. Like, how do you get like your fingers and your hands and your arms wrapped around that to make sure that, as you pointed out, in the 11 years leading up to that, there was one poorly rated movie, like Thor: The Dark World might have been like
that might have been the one.
only poorly rated, like sub 60% on Rotten Tomatoes or whatnot. So, but yeah, I think to the point, like I think they get two opportunities here to build back before the next Avengers comes out.
And here's a little inside baseball, like CinemaCon inside baseball. When we used to do this, like in the 15, 16, 17, there was one little tiny section of press, one little tiny section, sitting up there in the little second level of the Coliseum, and all alone. They wouldn't let anybody else sit next to us, like we smelled or something. Now
We still do. Some more than others, but go ahead.
Now there's like that whole section. It's hundreds of. And when that Silver Surfer chick came out, I guess I was in the section of people.
A lot of cheering. Yeah.
I was like, you're actually like, I can't judge whether it's you fanboys that are cheering or whether everybody in the audience is like, were the exhibitors cheering or was it just those fanboys?
It was exhibitors cheering.
Exhibitors as well.
God,
I'll compare this in CinemaCon terms as long as we're in this inside baseball segment. Where Fantastic Four was this year was where Wicked was 2 years ago. Where it's a great IP with a lot of potential, but not every musical has worked, and we haven't seen much, and it's been in production, and are you really going to make another one after this? And we needed a showing from Disney with this title that convinced people, and they nailed it. The same way that Universal has nailed every single Wicked presentation, Disney today made me a lot more confident that the Fantastic Four is a film property, something that it's never been before.
I would agree.
And let's close out this conversation with two of the biggest movies in the holiday corridor coming out later in this year. We've got in the Thanksgiving window Zootopia 2, and then we'll close out, of course, with Avatar: Fire and Ash. But first, let's talk Zootopia sequels. It's been one of those like quiet movies in like the last 20 years that Disney put out that keeps on getting rewatched. What I'm trying to say is there's going to be a live action remake of this maybe 10 years from now. But Chris, what I wanted to talk about here is that Moana 2 played a role in the schedule last year. And I look at the schedule this year, and you subtract Moana 2 and you insert Zootopia 2, are we getting the same result?
So we started off a little while ago talking about the biggest Thanksgiving. We said, hey, last year is going to be the biggest Thanksgiving we've had. I think this year will be the biggest Thanksgiving we've ever had.
Okay, this is breaking news, because last time, as I said, last year when we had you on before Thanksgiving, well before Thanksgiving, you said we're about to have the biggest Thanksgiving ever. Reminder, it's April 4th. You don't need to come out and say this on the record. You think this has the potential to beat last year's Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I think it has the potential absolutely to beat last year's Thanksgiving. Zootopia has the potential not only to open as the biggest movie of the year, but be the biggest movie of the year.
Yeah.
The property is huge, and overseas it is massive, like even more so than the domestic market. Like it is a massive property. And streaming and everything that's gone along in the time that it's been away, I think people will be shocked how big this movie opens. I think someone told me that even like the betting markets or whatever have it as the highest opening movie, right? Well, that's in the next movie we're going to talk about.
Wow.
I don't think Avatar will open the highest, but like it probably will be up there for the
for the highest. I mean, the Avatar thing. If we look back at the last Avatar sequel that came out theatrically, had the exact same opening weekend as the Batman did, but obviously legged out. In subsequent weeks. I think the same thing is going to happen. Moving on from Zootopia 2, which I do agree has that potential to be the defining movie of this year. My question, and I hate to say this out loud because I say this every year and I'm wrong every single time, is when does this start to decline? Is the Avatar business a business that's always booming? Or at a certain point, people are going to say, you know what, I've had enough of this?
Good luck betting against it. I will never bet against it. I'm not an Avatar guy, but people love it. And I thought that the second one would not do all, nearly what the first one did, and
especially since it came like 15 years later.
Yeah, 15 years or whatever.
13 years.
Yeah,
15 years of no one talking about Avatar, and
At
Avatar
all.
2 comes in and just completely nails it.
Well, it's such a. I mean, I think I know why. Like, it's Cameron. Never bet against James Cameron on anything. Like, so.
Although, what did you think of the footage they showed? I will preface what I'm about to say with it's early footage. The early footage never looks technically good. It looked dynamic range-wise really good.
No, that's
motion-wise from the motion, the 120 frames per second, it looked like video.
I am surprised to hear that, Sperling. I thought the HDR looked great in 3D. Like, great. And I am not a fan of these movies. I thought the footage was incredibly good.
Yeah.
Chad, how did you feel about what you saw?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, me personally, I'm not a huge Avatar guy either. I think, like, plot-wise, I feel like the story, I need to see something new. I need to see it go into a new direction. So, maybe these other cultures that they're bringing in will boost the storyline. I thought it looked good. It looked solid.
That wraps up our analysis here for today's final episode of our CinemaCon podcast series. A huge thank you to our colleagues Chad Kennard, Sperling Reich, and Chris Randleman for joining us in this week's episode. Coming up after the break is a tape recording of the Globally Speaking seminar session here at CinemaCon on day one. A number of top executives in distribution and exhibition coming at you right after this commercial break.
And it was one of the good ones.
One of the good ones. Coming up shortly.
I am joined here today on the final day of our CinemaCon 2025 podcast series with Alan Rowe, CEO of Jack Rowe and Tapas. Alan, we're recording this the week before CinemaCon, so I think we're probably both been a bit busy this week, but definitely not as busy and tired as we are going to be a week from now, in a good way. I think it's been since around Cine Europe last year that I spoke to you. How have you been since we last spoke?
Yeah, been good. Been very tiring, but just so exciting, really. A bit like the lead up to a trade show. Been a lot going on. I mean, last time we spoke, I think we were talking a bit about the sort of the dual strands of, some cinema really going the family entertainment centre sort of direction, and then other cinemas going, really focusing on sort of really content and programming and rep cinema and so on, and they're being sort of two big drivers in cinema. And so we're really proud. I mean, in the last 12 months, we have installed the Prince Charles Cinema in the centre of London, which certainly within the UK is one of our leading rep cinema sort of independent cinema sort of institutions, and certainly they come up on a lot of panels and so on internationally. In fact, I'd say the most cited cinema certainly I've ever heard on a panel, and that's been incredible. And then at the other end of the scale, we're just in the rollout now of B&B theatres, being of course internationally renowned for their progressive approach to family entertainment centres. So yeah, it's been very interesting indeed, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to touch on that with B&B. Exactly as you said, they're very innovative when it comes to these alternative concepts, whether it's family entertainment centers, or I believe there was one where they had like a spin class in a theater, or things that are oriented around children's programming, and parents can maybe go have a drink at a bar outside during that. We spoke about this last year. I feel like it's a trend that we've been speaking about on this podcast, and you have been touting as well for years. Where do you feel like we are on this road to people adopting the family entertainment center concept?
Well, I would say, yeah, we're well along the road for sure. I mean, B&B, as you say, incredibly innovative. One of the things that we love is the sort of the idea generation that they have, and I think it's a good fit for the idea generation that we have. It feels like, two companies that are both kind of yes companies, like, this sounds cool, let's try it. And that sort of lack of red tape, lack of the nose in the room, I think has been really, really exciting. The variety, the complexity of what's going on at Family Entertainment Centre, and the long-standing problems that have existed for family entertainment centres involving cinemas for a long time, really held back the cinema industry because they're not able to make full advantage of them. Going back to when I was a kid, back in the 1800s, whenever it was, you had a cinema, and then next door you had a pizza joint, and so on. But now obviously that's come into the cinema, and like most things, like the adoption of, say, digital cinema and so on, it happened to a degree, and then it became more integrated and more automated. And we're sort of in that process with FECs at the moment. So it's done. They're selling food in the buildings and so on for a number of years. But, how can this be improved from the customer standpoint in terms of wanting to make sure you're getting your points everywhere, make sure you've got a clear history of what's going on everywhere. But then also from the operational standpoint, you don't want to be dipping into 2, 3, 4, 5 different systems, not least A, it's a waste of time, and B, you can't spot and take advantage of all the operational efficiencies if that sort of thing's going on. And so for them to recognize in us that, we could solve this together has been, just a really fun and tiring ride. It's been absolutely lovely. And their team's been an absolute pleasure to work with. Actually, as have, Prince Charles and other customers as well. Just, we've got some really lovely customers. I don't necessarily say that enough. I really, really have some lovely customers.
Well, conveniently enough, actually, elsewhere in this episode, we'll be airing the Globally Speaking panel from the Monday of CinemaCon International Day. So it's great to have you on to get that global perspective. What are you seeing in the UK or internationally that has you excited about the future of cinema?
Part of it is how active cinema is internationally in terms of, this family entertainment stuff that we're doing in the US. We've got similar but different, parallels, but, they've got, say, football land and things like that. We've got something similar going on in Iceland. And, there was a cinema that we just opened in the past couple of months. And I say we opened it. We just did the poll system, to be clear. We weren't involved
a lot of companies opened it, yeah.
We can't take the credit for that. It was a beautiful job doing it. And, in Baghdad. Cinemas everywhere. We've got customers in Africa and so on. It's great to see how the cinema industry is doing internationally. I recognise that it's always cyclical. There's always ups, there's always downs, and people always worry about when the next big box office smash is coming along and so on. But there's a lot going on, both domestically and internationally.
Yeah, like you said, it is a cyclical industry. We're coming out of a Q1 that has been not great in terms of box office of some of the films. And I do believe as we're going to see some films coming out later this year and into next, some info at CinemaCon that I think is really going to turn that ship around. But for those periods that are not necessarily, thriving in terms of box office, how important is it, not necessarily for like a chain like B&B, but for one of those, a smaller independent cinema, a Prince Charles, a small regional chain? How important is it, and how possible is it, I guess, given limited resources, to have some of those extra innovative events?
I think innovative events can help for a number of reasons. Part of it is about connecting to the community. So there's a panel I saw recently at the UKCA with some excellent marketers on it, and they were talking about the importance, for example, of a cinema if they're getting involved with a charity, to try and make sure it's one that speaks to the local community those cinemas are in, and then that helps to build that, foster that sense of community around that in a non-cynical sense. Obviously, they do it for charitable reasons as well, but you may as well take best advantage of that. So I think connecting to the more unusual opportunities in the area helps to boost the profile, which in itself then feeds back. It's a bit like, for example, my wife's company, they're a B Corp. She did that because, she believes passionately in the environment. But obviously, that also has some feedback in terms of benefit of your business. I think it's true for people who help their local community. Their community gives back. So I think definitely engaging with them helps. And asking customers is huge. Asking people in the area what they want to see and trying to factor that into your programming is very significant. Also, just getting tickets on sale long in advance. Like I know, a lot of cinemas perhaps tend to program a week out. Well, some people simply won't. They book their lives out a month out.
Yeah.
Well,
some people have kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, if there's some shows that you can just commit to a couple of months ahead, just get those pre-sales online. That all helps. As far as everything that we've seen suggests that the earlier the show goes on sale, the more tickets it sells.
Absolutely. People think of this family entertainment center concept, and what comes to my mind, at least, is some of the big, I guess, more architectural intensive things that B&B is doing with like bowling and laser tag. But as you said, it can be smaller things that any cinema can do. You can partner with a charity for a local screening. And if you have a POS that integrates everything and has the capability, it's very easy to be like round up for charity. Give your customers thinking outside the box. It's not something that necessarily requires millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Absolutely. And even just seeing, cinema, I very much believe, as I'm always banging on about this, as I see as sort of a source of good, showing films which help people to think, help them to detach from their day-to-day lives, all kinds of wonderful things about cinema. Loads of people have like really fond early memories of their first trip or trips to going to the cinema. And, part of that, is supporting other groups within the cinema. So, you mentioned, having kids and so on, mother and or parent and baby performances are obviously a great way of just helping people who aren't necessarily having the easiest day. Equally, also friendly screenings, dementia-friendly screenings, loads of people out there who could be having a better day if they could go to the cinema. And yeah, as I say, purely cynically, it does help business, but it's also just good for the community. So yeah, there's things that can be done there. I heard about a cinema recently that started doing like a film quiz in their cinema screen. People love feeling part of it rather than purely a consumer. I think when you feel like a consumer, that's when there's a bit more of a problem. I think you feel like a customer and part of your local cinema. And that's partly, of course, we talk about memberships and so on often now. People like to feel a member, people like to belong to community, and having a membership program and a membership card is actually a part of that. People like it, whether it makes financial sense or not. They want to be a part of their local cinema if they believe in it.
I'm waiting for one of those like craft screenings to come along where the lights are up a little bit and you can embroider or knit or do whatever I'm waiting for that to hit with a movie that I'm looking forward to, and I'll be there. I'll buy the ticket when it goes on sale, however early that is.
That's a great idea.
Well, in terms of programming, I want to ask you about one of the big subjects in cinema industry. In a lot of industries, it's a subject of a panel at CinemaCon, AI. We're hearing a lot about it being used in maybe programming or staffing, scheduling. How do you see AI being of use to cinemas when integrated into a POS system?
Well, just to finish up that plug for the CinemaCon panel, it's one that I'm on and have been organising. It's at 8 a.m. on Thursday at Palace Ballroom 3. It's got some extra people.
It was a very great panel. It was such an insightful panel.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that next week. I've got a bunch of people on it, but if I was going to shout out a couple, we've got Otto Turton from the Chief Commercial Officer of View. We've got Jeff Rosenfeld, Senior Vice President of Digital and Customer Experience at Cinemark. So just those two alone, it's well worth going along. It might have been a late night, Wednesday night, but set that alarm and come and join us. But yeah, so I think most of the POS companies are working on similar things. So film recommendations, scheduling to try and maximize some performances and get the right show times on the right films. Of course, employee scheduling sort of ties in with that. Employee scheduling sort of recommendations, generating marketing content using generative AI, of course, segmenting audiences. Yeah, really just taking any kind of a human task that could be done more efficiently or possibly better with AI or machine learning. Well, okay, machine learning is a part of AI, but talk about machine learning and generative AI. Then, we're going to increasingly be seeing it. And something that I find quite interesting is when the cinema industry went digital, it was very much, first of all, of course, the console manufacturers were impacted because the projector manufacturers were starting to do more consoles and so on. And then the projector manufacturers were impacted because people started reusing projectors. And then finally, us as the suppliers manufacturers, we were impacted. So we could see digital cinema coming, but we were sort of the last ones really to be impacted. And so that was very fortunate. And it's a similar sort of thing here. The cinema, the movie production industry is absolutely, there's AI all over it. And we're going to talk briefly about that on Thursday. But, it's right through the industry, and other creative industries have been massively, massively impacted. But the cinema exhibition industry has been able to watch to a degree on the sideline. Now, 2025 is the point at which you don't need to panic if you haven't fully embraced it at this stage. Totally get it. I think it's a lot of people in a lot of industries who haven't. But if it gets to this stage next year and you haven't, you could start to have operational business problems, I believe. So it's really important. 2025 needs to be the year that the cinema exhibition industry thinks very seriously and gets on board with AI.
Yeah, this year, it's 2025, we're looking at the year of implementation and installation, not just for AI, but for all these other interesting concepts that we've been seeing at CinemaCon and in other trade shows regionally across the world for the last couple of years. It's easy to say installation, install it, but there's so many different moving parts to it. Any tips, I guess, from a planning perspective on how to best approach what seems like such a monumental task?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I would say that the very first thing is do your research, and I'm always banging this drum. Pick the right system in the first place. If you have very basic requirements, go for a basic system. If you don't have basic requirements, don't think you're going to get sophisticated requirements from a basic system.
Just be straightforward about what you want and ask people.
Absolutely. Don't just kick the tire. Take the tire off, have a look at it. If you want 30 years of development, then obviously a system like Tapos is the way to go. And it certainly, in my view, but there's no point in expecting something which isn't quite what it
just because it's easy and it'll tide you over, and then you just have to redo the whole thing in like
exactly.
a few years. Yeah,
exactly. Do your diligence when you're putting your system in terms of find out what system can do, but also find out what your existing system can do. Because if it doesn't need to be replaced, then you're going to save yourself a bunch of work. If it does, great, you've done your diligence, you can be confident, crack on with it. So I'd say from the POS standpoint, key is not over promising. Be realistic about what you can do, what you can't do, and if you can't do something, let people know maybe when you can do it by. We have an internal philosophy where we always choose one happy customer over two unhappy ones. We would much rather, and we have said no where there's maybe someone asking for something to be put on top of another install, and we just say, well, look, we can't make them both a success, and we promise to make this one successful. So when we schedule and commit to a customer, we take it extremely seriously. And for us, having 30 years worth of features helps enormously when it comes to deployment. With something like, say, let's say it's offering gift cards or something, then you could say, oh, do you have gift cards? Yep. Do you sell them online? Yep. But all the other details that come around that, you could write the programming for that in an afternoon. But, can you do print at home as PDF? Can you do e-gift? Can you do custom graphics in both? Can you do physical mail order? Can you have rush mail order fees? Can you correct the email address if they make a mistake and resend it? Can you batch load them? Can you do a scratch off pin for maybe if you're selling them in Costco?
I'm getting a headache. I'm getting a headache. That's too much.
That's scratching the surface of gift cards. And that's the danger, is it can be so easy to say, oh yeah, we can do that, tick. And then the problem that Cinema can then have is if they go to use a feature and 30%, even 20% of it is missing, it might be enough that they actually mean they can't use that entire module. And that's where problems come in.
Yeah, and that could be the difference between somebody coming to their cinema and not coming to their cinema. So definitely do your research. And I know that's something that Jack Around Tapas has always been very proud of, is its ability to integrate with other companies and to not just have you have to use everything that's ours and that's it. So it sounds like that really kind of fits in with that philosophy.
Thank you. Yeah. I often think of it as a bit like with a menu, where the ideal restaurant is where you go to one, you see a lovely menu with lots of things or various things you'd like to choose from. But when you go to a restaurant, you don't expect to have to write the menu. Like, you want to see the menu and pick things off it. And when we do something, say for B&B, sometimes say someone like Prince Charles will go, oh, that looks cool, I'm going to use that. And equally, we do something for Prince Charles, and B&B will go, oh, that looks cool, I'm going to use that. And so we feel like we've got a pretty comprehensive menu, and people shouldn't really have to write their own menus. And I like what you said about the people sort of picking the bits they want. Yeah, we just have been completing an integration with box office websites, which we're really thrilled about. I think box office is really thrilled about, and it means anyone with a box office website can use Tapos, which is great. We're all for integrations. We're doing an integration at the moment with One Dime, Brunswick. We've already got an Intercom one. We're adding to that as well. Our feeling is, if someone wants box office's website or whoever's website and our website, then our ticketing system, then great. That's cinema's choice. Every cinema's different. Like, go for it. And we're here to try and make things possible to provide those backends.
It's a great note to end on, coming out of CinemaCon, where this is a community. Everybody knows one another. Certainly, I think that a certain amount of competition is healthy and necessary in the industry. But it's an ecosystem that's very complex, and we all need each other.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the competition thing, I totally agree. It's a massive, compared to restaurant, it's a small industry, but internationally, it is a massive industry, the cinema industry. And weirdly, I actually feel bad when I take a customer competitor. I kind of wish that there weren't any losers in that situation, but it's just kind of the nature of how it is. I don't take any pleasure from it. There's plenty of room for all of us in this industry, and we can all provide something perhaps slightly different.
Well, Alan, thanks so much for joining us. It's great to have Jack Around Tapas' support on this podcast series. I say thank you on behalf of everyone who could not make it to CinemaCon, who hopefully has learned something these last few days about what's gone down at this year's show.
Thanks so much, Rebecca.
Thanks, Mike, and good luck with your expansion plans. Now, when it comes to our industry, the landscape is changing at warp speed. The best, and maybe only way to stay ahead of the curve, is to embrace the lessons of the past, not to rest on the laurels of current success, and most importantly, to keep a focus on future opportunities. We need to be open-minded, creative, forward-thinking, and willing to take bold risks. This morning's panel discussion features 5 executives who embody all these qualities. No pressure, guys. It is my pleasure to introduce Michael O'Leary, President and CEO of Cinema United, and a distinguished guest.
Thank you, Laura. This is a power-packed panel. I'm just the guy holding the note cards. But everybody, Jeff Goldstein, who is the president of global distribution at Warner Brothers. Mark Vienne, the president of international distribution at Paramount. Alejandro Ramirez, CEO of Cinepolis. And Tim Richards, CEO and founder of View International. So we're looking forward to a lively discussion this morning. All right, thank you, gentlemen, for taking some time and being with us this morning. Let's jump right in, and I'll start with our friends in distribution. Do you think that the international marketplace gets the consideration it deserves when you're making decisions on what movies to make and how to market them?
I'll start with that. Absolutely yes. We sit as part of a green light committee, and we actually are now sending our scripts out to all our territories, having them come back and give us their points of view. In fact, Toby Tennant and Amia for Warner Brothers is leading that across the world, and it's been amazing. After about 8 or 9 scripts, they love having homework on the weekends, and they love writing book reports like they're back in middle school. But the real point of it is we get input on what it is we're making and the choice of cast. So that perhaps if we just make little changes here and there, that we can really up the offering.
Yeah, no, totally agreed. From a green light standpoint, obviously we look at it on a global basis. But, and listen, some movies will be a little bit more skewed towards international, some will be a little bit more skewed towards domestic, but that's what obviously makes up the entire slate. But yeah, we get a lot of input from, all of our territories and regions around the world. And it's really the only way to make sure that you're going to have a viable product on a global basis.
Sure, thank you. So for the whole panel, the truth is the box office recovery in Europe has been stronger than it has been in other parts of the world and in the US. Why do you think that's the case? And are there models that are being utilized in Europe which might be transferred to the United States to try and speed the recovery there? I'll start at the end with Tim, but I'd like to hear from everyone.
Yeah, I think in Europe we have the benefit of local filmmakers, which you don't see as much in the domestic market. And if you look at a market like France, that last year in 24, 44% of box office was French films. And I think that certainly, if you look at all the markets across Europe, and there's 3 or 4 of the top 10 highest grossing films of every year are local films. And I think that really helps kind of like just really fill in the gaps when other films aren't there. So I think that's probably the biggest single point of differentiation. But also, I think we've set, as I said earlier today, our customers never deserted us. They never left us. And we've seen that. We've seen when you have a black and white film like Belfast gross, 15, 16 million, when you have, and right through to we saw this incredible summer last summer with, we set 2 more records. The bookends were, in Inside Out 2 at one end, and you had Deadpool the other end, and everything in between. So, we don't have a demand issue. We just have a small supply issue, which is a limited period of time.
Yes, I think in addition to the importance of local content, I think also Europe has a more consistent and longer window before movies get released in PVOD and TVOD and SVOD. And I think that also has helped the recovery. The fact that in France you have a very long window, but on average, we're in Spain and in most European countries, the average window is above 75 days. So the fact that you have a 75-day window, and in the US is 30 plus, 34 days, I think that also plays to the faster recovery of Europe. And I think it's something you also see in other regions like Latin America that has also a longer, consistent window above 60 days.
Listen, I think, well, we're not going to talk about windows here. Listen, I think, what Tim said, listen, we have the international market, and this is, around the globe, really has the advantage of having local productions. When you can have, anywhere from 40 to 50% of your business coming from local productions, then on top of that, you have the Hollywood Fair. Obviously, you're going to be an incredibly healthy market. But I think I also want to give, credit to both Alejandro and Tim with, the cinema infrastructure, certainly in Europe, Latin America. I think it's some of the best in the world. They have been doing the VIP screens, the PLF screens for such a long time, and they've really developed this with audiences, and I think that it really has become that destination. So I think those are two really key points about why they have recovered a little bit faster.
Yeah, incredibly important to know your audience, obviously. Yeah. They do a great job. Jeff, your perspective?
Yeah, I would go back to local productions. We've had such a robust program over a sustained period of time, particularly in Germany, certainly in the UK, Spain, Italy, and that really has augmented it. And clearly, the local audiences are embracing that in a big way, so it's just more content. And I think that's probably a theme we're going to hear a lot, not only in this panel, I'm sure, but throughout the week, is just the number of movies that are being made, and how do we increase that, and what the problems associated with that are.
Do you think that we've seen some of these local productions break through in the United States and do, relatively well here. What do you think the role of some of that production is in the future of what you do, of your production and the slates you put together? Do you see more production from around the world being part of what you distribute?
You want to take it?
We really look at it on a territory by territory basis, along with regional. Listen, not everything is going to play around the world, and that's okay. We're specifically either going into production or doing some distribution deals with some local players to really enhance our slate. But that really kind of turns into a territory by territory.
Fair enough. So, big picture. When you look at the horizon, whatever that is for you, could be 2 weeks, could be 3 years, whatever your horizon is, what about the international market encourages you, and what is something that concerns you? And I'll start with Alejandro.
Well, something that concerns me and is tied to the window discussion is the rise and the earlier peaks that we're seeing in digital piracy. The nature of piracy changed with the advent of digital technologies. In the past, people had to get out of their homes and go and buy a pirated Blu-ray or DVD disc. Now they can just download it, pirated films from the comfort of their couch or bed or desk with a click. And so we're seeing that. I'm sure many of us have seen that even people in our social circles sometimes tell you they've already seen a movie that has not come out on cinemas. And that didn't used to be the case, 10 years ago. And I think that has to do with the advent of digital piracy, which is creating these huge peaks of illegal downloads. So that's what concerns me, and it's tied obviously to the release of the pivot window, and namely the early release of a pivot window in this country, in the US, drives earlier peaks in global piracy. So that's something that really concerns us, because we saw, for instance, with movies that have different release dates, that they don't go day and date everywhere, like the movie Conclave, for instance. When we released it in Mexico, when it was released in Japan, it had been already released on pivot in the US a month earlier, and we saw that really had an impact on movie tickets. So that's one of the things that concerns me the most.
Well, Conclave is an interesting example because the demographic for that isn't necessarily the age group you associate with piratical activity. So that's an interesting example.
Yes. So even in adult films like Conclave, so even more so if you go to other type of films that are more geared to the younger audiences, that are the ones that do more illegal downloads.
Sure. Jeff?
Well, I think there's a bigger story here, and the bigger story here is the economics of making motion pictures. And what's that value proposition? Yes, technology has brought a huge amount of positives, but there's also been a huge amount of negatives in our business. So when you look at that value proposition, it's a bigger story. How do you make movies that net a studio money in today's economy? And particularly for legacy studios, it's much different than streaming companies that have different kind of funding. So this is a much bigger story in how we're healthy. We used to talk about pre-pandemic that we were upside down on half our slate. And we always said that's not sustainable. How is it that a studio could lose money on half the slate, but maybe their partners and customers are making money on every title? So we have to figure out how we can right the ship it's not just about one piece of it, it's about a larger piece. And I think that we'll get there pretty soon and in a short period of time because we have to. We don't have a choice.
That's interesting. I want to come back to that. But Tim?
I think when you've been through a pandemic, there's not much more that can scare you anymore. So, I mean, I think that, I just get excited when I look at the future of where we're going. And I think the one thing that has really changed, and you can see and feel the difference. I mean, I was in LA with the studios in the 90s, and it was 1994, it was 94, when international receipts passed domestic receipts for the first time. Because previously, if you had international in your business card, that was kind of a nice way of saying you're one step towards the door. And suddenly it became a big issue, and the studios started really committing to marketing and promoting their films, opening up offices worldwide. It made a huge difference. But what I've really seen since the pandemic is we don't seem to be really, not that we ever argued in the past, but there were times when there's small areas of friction. Those seem to be, for the most part, gone. And I know our relationship in all of our markets with the studios now has never been better. And we are doing what we should be doing. We're sharing information. We're in the front line with our customers. We share information. We work, we market and promote films together, and we both win as a consequence. And I think I look at some of the big movies that have released, and yes, there's been some disappointments, but when you look at some of the movies, they definitely benefited from that. They definitely overperformed because of that little extra bit that we collectively put in together. So I think it's a really good thing. And this year, we know, it's going to be a good year, maybe a very good year, not a great year. And so companies, businesses don't get many opportunities to pause when there's an end, which I believe there is. So we are taking this year to just run 100 miles an hour, to refurbish our cinemas, put in new technologies, put in new laser projectors, new recliner seats, upgrade our AI that we've been using, and just do everything possible to get ready for next year and the years to come. And that's really how we're focusing now.
Is there anything that concerns you? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that really is great.
Yeah. Is there anything that concerns you on the horizon?
I sleep very well right now.
Well, it's good to be Tim. Mark.
Yeah, I think, going off what Tim said, I think one of the great opportunities that we have and have been experienced, I think, over the last 2 years is the collaboration now between exhibition and distribution. It's never been better. I think everyone is really trying to find that angle and that little niche of how do we get just a little bit better. And as we're sharing data between ourselves and then, obviously looking at our marketing campaigns and how can we funnel that into what data that they're supplying us, it really is letting us hone in on an audience that, maybe we were not overlooking, but we weren't totally going after them. And I think, they're the cinema goers. They're constantly, going, and that is one thing that we are really trying to exploit. I think that's a great opportunity. And I'll say the one thing that worries me, and again, might be a little controversial, but I'm worried about the pre-show, about what's going on in cinemas. We have for years and years talked about the experience of going to the cinema. Experience is everything. You know how it is when you go to a restaurant and it's a bad experience, you don't return. And that's something that I think that we really, really need to continue to work on. And I know advertising obviously is something vitally important on a financial standpoint, but in today's world, you could sit at home and, I don't know, have, Netflix or any of these and not watch any commercials. But now we're telling people to go to the cinema and watch commercials. It's almost counterintuitive. And I know it's not that easy just to turn it off, but I do think it's something that we have to continue to work on because, again, experience is everything.
Yeah, I mean, you raised two interesting points there. One is the data point, which I want to come back to, but I'd be curious from the exhibitor side, the issue of pre-show is something which does come up, not just in these discussions, but in your experience when you go to the theater. I'd be curious what the thoughts of Alejandro and Tim are on that.
Sure, I think that's a very important point, Mark. I couldn't agree more that we have to take care of our customer first and foremost. And I think, there's always the temptation, to sell more ads, to make longer pre-shows, but that is affecting the customer experience. So in our case, we've been trying to limit ourselves to a maximum number of ads, and in such a way that we always secure at least 4 trailers before the movie. So the premiere spot is for trailers and is right before the movie, so that customers that arrive a little bit late or that they're still buying, in the concession stand will not miss the trailers. And we try to limit, our aspiration is not to have pre-shows longer than 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think in Europe, our customers have had advertisements for forever, 30, 40 years, certainly as long as I've been in the business. And they are high quality ads. And that's a big difference. This isn't Farmer John's secondhand cars. These are high quality ads, and they're high quality enough that they go to the Lions and Cannes for kind of global awards. And so that's one key point. And
when you say higher quality, you mean they're entertaining ads?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it and feel it. I mean, it's movie quality. It's not a TV ad. But I think also, most importantly, is that we actually market film times. So if you want to miss that, when the film starts and you come a little bit later and you walk in and you get your seat. Most of our customers prefer the whole experience because you get some of these great ads and you also get all the trailers immediately beforehand as well. So, and we have the house lights on during the advertisements. And we make sure that when the trailers come out that they get a full cinematic experience. So the lights go out like a normal film. And our customers are used to that.
So while we're on the topic of pre-show, and I think obviously trailers are a huge part of advertising, what's the right number of trailers to show before a movie, Jeff?
Well, I actually think there are two parts of that question. What's the right number of trailers, and what's the length of those trailers?
That was going to be my
So it's
question.
interesting on the length of the trailers. I'm going to start there first because I'm an advocate for different lengths of trailer. Not all trailers need to be of a certain 2.5 minutes. That was established 20 years ago and in some sort of discussion with people that are long gone in our business. And whatever that negotiation was, maybe was appropriate at that point in time. At this point in time, I think you're better off sometimes getting your message and telling your story in 90 seconds or in 45 seconds or in 2 minutes. And I think that that's the type of thing that all of us have to look at on a studio side. How do we best get our message across, and what are the different ways we can do that? So that's really the first part of it. The second part of it is interesting. A number of exhibitors just in the last 2 weeks, as we've had different groups come in advance of CinemaCon, have been talking about how they're looking at cutting back their number of trailers, and they've asked, what is that actual number, and what is the rate? Is there an industry standard? And I don't think there's an industry standard. I do think that each individual company has to look at their own programming and saying, clearly 25 minutes is too long.
Yeah. Alejandro, what's the right number of trailers and how long should they be?
Yeah, I think, I agree with Jeff, that too long of a trailers may not be needed, in order to be able to, have an impact. There's some exceptions, but I think in our case, is 4 trailers. We think that more than 4 trailers people cannot retain, and less than 4 trailers, I think we're doing a disservice at promoting and marketing other films. Sometimes what we struggle is to find the right trailer to accompany a movie of a genre that we have not enough content of, like comedy and dramas. So sometimes that's where we struggle, but we never do less than 4 trailers. Exceptionally, we do a 5th trailer, but ideal number is 4.
Mark?
I'm in that camp. I think 4 to 5 trailers is probably the right thing to do. But again, depending on the length, if all of them are 2.5, 3 minutes long, then it's too long. But yeah, I think 4 would be great. 3 Paramount trailers and 1 for everybody else is all right.
I think you said that incorrectly. You meant 4 for Warner Brothers. Okay.
But listen, in the international marketplace, we really do cut down trailers. So we show a lot of 60-second and 90-second trailers. We know that space is limited. And again, it is all about the pre-show and not being too long. So we actively try to pursue a 60 to 90-second trailer.
Yeah, it's the single greatest marketing tool that we have. And I think we've all seen the data about how important it is to our industry. What you don't see is the practical side of it. I get a lot of complaint letters because when you're doing 100 million people, unfortunately, you're going to piss somebody off somewhere. But I get a lot of complaint letters from people who missed a scene that was in the trailer that wasn't in the movie. That is the attention to detail those trailers get. It's extraordinary. So you can't underestimate how powerful that is.
I have a follow-up. I talked about 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or 90 seconds. What I didn't say is, if there's a compelling piece that's 5 minutes, or something that's really unique, that's going to be a clutter buster, because that's all our issues in marketing to the public today, is linear TV marketing doesn't work. What does work is working with exhibitors through your own data programs, using your subscription programs and loyalty programs and such. But if there is a compelling piece of footage that's 7 minutes, 5 minutes, absolutely we should all go after that.
Okay. One thing I'll make a plug here. This is an idea which came from Europe, from Eddie Duquesne. We're going to do something through the Cinema Foundation in the United States on April 22nd and 24th, sneak peek showcase, where we're going to take a bunch of trailers and content that our studio partners and Paramount and Warner Brothers are a part of this, and we're going to basically have a 75 minute show where people can come and make a small donation and get to see what we're trying to do is wrap up a little bit of CinemaCon and take it to the heartland. So thank you both for the participation of your studios, and thank you, Eddie Duquesne, for reminding us that all good ideas come from Europe. And to Tim's point, it is the most effective advertising piece we have. There's people on my staff who would watch 20 trailers if you would play them. So I don't think that's healthy, but I think 4 is probably safe. So,
but it's been great. What Eddie's done in Belgium with this program has been really great. The audience really feels special about it. That renewed interest back in cinema. It's a really great program.
Agreed. Mark, you raise another issue which I want to go back to, and that's the issue of data. It comes up all of the time. There's different types of data which I think either side thinks that they would be beneficial to get to.
Right.
I think exhibition would love to know more about what's behind the PVOD numbers, and I think from the studio side, you want to know what's going on with the customer data. And I guess my question we don't want to get into anything proprietary or anything like that, but we talk about that problem a lot. What's the solution? What's the solution that works for everybody?
Well, listen, I think, with the vast data that you guys have, with your loyalty programs, and again, people that are literally, they're committed to the cinema, they love the offers that you guys are taking, and I think, as we are sharing that information more and more, it is just a way to ensure the success of films and making sure that we are reaching the right amount of people on this, and in a very cost-effective way, right? Ultimately, we both have the same goal. It's putting butts in seats and making sure that they're enjoying the experience, enjoying the film, and the rest, so they keep coming back. But listen, I think it's Michael. I think it's about it is about working together and realizing we're both going to benefit from the sharing of, again, like a loyalty program, people that are really just, cinema crazy at the end of the day.
Tim, I'd be curious on your views on this. You put a lot of time and energy into cultivating your audience and know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, we 10 years ago, we embarked on an AI journey, and that has been absolutely massive. And we spent 2 years building an AI model that we've been using very effectively now for the last 8 years. And it was a painful process that if we were to embark on it today, would probably be a couple of months instead of 2 years that it took us to do it. But it's allowed us to identify all of our customers around every single cinema in every community in the UK, and now we've rolled it out in Italy, and now we're rolling it out across our other markets. And it's allowed some kind of extraordinary numbers. I mean, we are able to maximize our screens through the AI, so we're able to play more movies to more of our customers. So we play 50% more films typically than others are able to do. And we play an absolutely extraordinary 46% of foreign language films a year on our screens. And that's because the AI knows where our customers are. And this is some of the data that we are sharing the best that we can with our partners. Because I think we all learn when we're in the front line, we know our customers and we know where every little pocket of our customer are. And it's about maximizing screen utilization. I mean, we know the numbers. I mean, we have 22% occupancy rates. That we need to look at as 80% opportunity. And certainly working together, we can start to fill those screens. And sometimes it might only be a couple of showings a week, but it's all incremental and it's all helping. And over the course of a year, it allows us to show your films more often.
Alejandro?
Well, we also work very closely with the distribution companies and with our loyalty program. I mean, we have 1 million more loyal customers post-pandemic than before pandemic, but they're still, they're going to the movies 30% less than they used to. So that is in part of the fact that we've widened from 5 to 6 million loyal customers. But so we're really using this database to target, the customers that we know that have not been coming as frequently as they used to understand why they're coming less, and to experiment with, promotions that we think would be relevant to them. So now with analytical tools and AI tools, you can target, customers in a much more specific way than that used to be the case when we didn't have all these tools. So we work hand in hand. We still, control how often and how much information we send to our customers, but we do it hand in hand with the distributors, and it's worked very well.
Well, and we can't bombard them either, exactly, because then they just start to turn off and delete every message. So exactly, yeah, we got to be really careful on that.
Jeff, do you have thoughts on how we can use data better?
Well, we have to use data better. There's no question that the traditional methodologies that we were using to get to an audience just have stopped working. And there's no question in marketing our movies, those costs have gone up but become less effective. So turning to an exhibitor, working with their fabulous loyalty programs, subscription programs, and social media platforms is really the key to success. And we recognize that, and we just have to tap into that in a bigger way.
So one of the themes of this week is how we can, to your point about collaboration, work together and grow the industry on all fronts, make the pie bigger, if you will. If you could snap your fingers and change one thing, it doesn't have to be one thing you would do, it could be one thing somebody else should do that would help us grow the industry, what would it be? Jeff?
One thing. I don't think it's just one thing, but I only get one thing. First of all, I got to go back to something Tim said, because it kind of ties into this. I love that comment that you made, Tim, about this is a point in time where the whole industry is arm in arm, because this is a crucial moment of inflection where We have to figure out how to win and sustain ourselves over a long period of time. And I'm so energized by the kinds of conversations that we are constantly having with how to solve our problems. So if I had to snap my fingers, it would be to have more of these kinds of conversations in small rooms, medium-sized rooms, and large rooms on how do we solve for where we want to be? How do we get to a space that we were winning? Years ago, not that far long ago, when there was a robust transactional business in home entertainment, that gave studios this windfall of money where they can make tons of movies. And during those years, I remember very naively in rooms where people were saying, "Oh, we're going through a rough period of time." That wasn't a rough period of time. Those were the good old days, no question about it. So if I had to snap my finger, it's just getting together with everybody, explaining each other's issues, and figuring out how do we get to a win.
Great. Tim?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we've kind of covered it, a lot of it already. But I mean, I think it is happening. I mean, we are together like we've never been before, and I think it's continuing that, and it's like Jeff said. I mean, it is. We're all in the same ecosystem. We're all trying to get to the same place, and I think by the closer we work, the better it will be. And I think we're on a really great start right now.
Okay, Mark.
I guess I would say, if I could snap my fingers, I wish that we could have the slates that we used to have on a constant basis, 2019 before. Listen, everyone is still working to get their slates back to where it was, but if I could snap my fingers right now, that would be the thing that would probably help the most.
You'd probably get a lot of support for that. Alejandro?
Well, I was going to say the same thing as Mark. You're just having more consistent slate. We're still 25, 28% below wide release numbers to pre-pandemic. But since you said it, the other thing that I would love to have is a consistent global window of a minimum of 45 days.
So I want to talk a little bit about marketing. I think there's some amazing marketing that happens in this industry every day. I also think, we talked earlier about how we know our customers better than anyone. You look at, there are different situations, and I'm sure you've all experienced this. You have a great movie, you market it, you put money behind the marketing, you do everything the way you think it's supposed to be done, and it doesn't reach the audience for whatever reason. And based with that, how do you assess the kind of current state of marketing? Do we have to abandon what we've known? Is there some secret sauce we haven't unearthed? Like, it seems from an exhibitor point of view, critical. We talk about windows. It has to be a window that's supported by marketing. In a lot of cases, what we've known in the past doesn't work anymore. How do you, particularly Mark and Jeff, from your perspective, when you sit and look at kind of the landscape of marketing, what are your thoughts on that? What do you feel like we have to do better?
Well, I sit right in the middle of that, and I look at the frustration. The dollars we spend are, in many cases, much greater than we've ever spent before, but the effectiveness is much less. And the ability to come up to a net profit is really rough. And when you look at those numbers, quite frankly, it does keep you up at night, and it keeps me up at night. And I wish I could say I don't stay up at night, but that's what does keep me up at night. And we are looking as an industry. How do you get that audience? How do you excite them? The fact that you have to hit a bullseye right in the center. You used to be able to look at a target, and if you got to the third concentric circle, you could buy a weekend, or you can get to the second concentric circle, you might even get a full week. Now you don't get past the previews. The world is a village, and the information gets out in a nanosecond, and that could really kill a concept that you may have worked out for a long period of time. And unfortunately, at Warner's, we've had a couple of real misses of really expensive movies. And you look at our postmortems, we'll go back and say, okay, what did we do wrong? What would we like to do next time? And how do we overcome that? And so much of it is a frustration with not being able to reach an audience.
Yeah, I mean, marketing today, it's so fragmented, right? You have to hit so many different bullseyes across many of the different avenues that that we're going down, and audiences, their tastes are constantly changing. What we did last month that maybe was a huge success, you try to replicate, and their tastes have moved on. So it's made that marketing message, even harder. So what we really are trying to focus on is, whatever message that we're going out, how is that going to connect and relate to that specific audience in that specific, it could be on TikTok, it could be on TV, anything. But you're constantly trying to have to change your message. But then, like Jeff said, the information is spreading so quickly, so it's really hard to keep those messages separate to those separate audiences. It has definitely become a very, very challenging time, and it's a very expensive time. And that is, I think, our biggest challenge of how much money we're spending to try to not just open movies, but to get the best out of the lifetime from them.
Right. It's odd in the sense that there's more ways to reach people, but it's harder to reach them. I also wonder, and I'd be curious about your thoughts about this, I'm not convinced we know exactly what drives consumer decision making. So like when I was a kid, which was a long time ago, we went to the theater on Friday night and we figured out what we were going to see sometimes when we got there. We went to the movies. I can't get my kid off the couch to, walk to the kitchen. So that's not gonna happen anymore. You also have a generation, I'll use my kids as an example. I don't like anecdotal stuff, but my kids are in their 20s. They're the first generation that's had a phone the whole time. The way they process information is different than the way I do. And it's not just generational, but you layer on top of that the pandemic. Do we know enough about what motivates moviegoers? And I guess the second part of this question is there's such a rush to decide on opening weekend that a movie is either a success or a failure. If the audience is more discerning and takes longer for a movie to build, aren't we undercutting it when 6 hours after it's out, it's been declared a bomb, or 17 days after it's out, it's off the theaters? So I'd be curious, I think those pieces all fit together. I don't have an answer, but I'd be curious what everybody's thoughts are. I may be completely off.
Yeah, look, I mean, I before the pandemic, we sat down with McKinsey, and they were doing kind of a big piece of kind of a health check, really. And I sat down with one of the senior partners kind of as a kickoff meeting after we kind of did a big, huge data download. And I said, look, we are a different kind of industry. We're not like other industries. And he said, yeah, every CEO thinks same, that their company's unique. And 6 months later, he came back, it's McKinsey, and said, this is one of the weirdest industries I've ever seen. We have a new product to a new customer, a new film to a new customer, a different demographic every week. Like, how do you do that? We're not selling a consistent widget to customers. And so I think it's clearly a case of there's not a one-size-fits-all strategy. And I think what we've really seen is kind of really post-pandemic period. Gen Z, they're different. They are absolutely different than previous generations. I mean, every generation is a little bit different, but they act and react very, very differently. And they've been a little bit harder nut to crack, but they're there. And they're social. They're probably more social as a generation than previous generations. And they love spending time with their friends. So I think we've got a real opportunity to really kind of buckle down. But I'd also say, I mean, the marketing is really on two sides. We've got marketing for the movies, but we've also got marketing for the cinemas. And I think that we need to do a better job really communicating the high quality investments that we are making in our sites. And I go insane. I mean, I went to see Snow White with our new laser projector in London. And I was just so, I mean, I've seen laser projectors forever now, but I was just absolutely blown away by how incredible this picture was with the sound. And yes, we have a little we've got laser projectors here, but we're not telling people this is incredible. And, I mentioned it earlier, but we missed that when digital came out. We didn't tell our customers, look, this is incredible. Look at this amazing new sight and sound package we have. The leather recliner seats, you push a button, your legs go up. We need to start communicating that more. And I think that our customers need to hear that. I mean, some of the things that I've seen what exhibitors are building around the world, it's unbelievable. And I just feel like we are missing a bit of a trick there.
Yeah, need to promote the experience better. Jeff, I'd be curious your thoughts on reaching people.
Well, let me start with, I think what exhibition has been doing is really incredible around the world. And as we have gone out and looked at new theaters, I've had an opportunity as I've taken on this new role to get out and see the best in the markets. I'm totally blown away. And it's not just the seats, it's not just the physical space, but it really is the projection. And when you sit and look on the big screen, a laser is a game changer, particularly in 3D. Which is definitely enjoying a resurgence. And if you want to check out great 3D, go look at Minecraft at a theater near you, everywhere in the world this weekend. But it really is absolutely noticed on the part of studios, and just speaking for Warner's, on the kind of huge investment that you're making to support our expensive movies, and we give you a round of applause for that.
Okay. Alejandro, thoughts on how to reach people?
Yes. Well, first to your earlier question about what's driving people to go to theaters, I think the number one thing is content, for sure. And I was just going to mention the survey done by the Global Cinema Federation of over 68,000 respondents, and I think that showed some very interesting insights. One is that there are no significant barriers for people to go to the movies if they find the content that is exciting to them to go watch. So that's something that it's very good. And another thing is that they did mention some genres that were lacking enough content, and we heard it earlier in the breakfast that comedies are underrepresented. 51% of respondents says we want more comedies. Dramas are underrepresented, and romance is underrepresented. 35% of respondents also said they want more romance. So I think that's the number one thing driving attendance is content, and two is the experience. What Tim was mentioning, we need to continue to enrich the movie-going experience, and I think we've been all trying hard to enrich with specialty formats and premium large screens and luxury cinemas, and just an easier way also to buy your tickets and your concession stand using digital tools. So all of that, I think, is the other thing that really is driving the experience. And awareness, fortunately for all of us, and as difficult as it is to reach customers, in the surveys, it shows that people are aware. It's not lack of awareness that is inhibiting going to the cinemas. And as we also saw in Valmir's presentation, 68% of customers are excited about something that is coming up in the next 6 months. So more or less, people are aware, especially for the large titles. Of course, we need to continue to do, better efforts for, to position the smaller titles.
Mark, do you have thoughts? Or?
Yeah, just, certainly to reach audiences, from a marketing angle, listen, I think one of the most important things you can have is the team that you have around you to make sure that it is a very, I want to say, diverse crowd, because you want people that are in their 20s and you want people that are older, like us, but who are not in their 20s. But it really, the perspective that everybody has is very different. Even though you're in the same room, you're talking the exact same thing. So it's really important to have that as your team to make sure that you're getting that right message out. But I also think, listen, messaging in general is something that's so important. Like you just said, unfortunately, a movie opens and the first thing the press do is say, oh, it's a disaster. So we continue to tell audiences that the cinema business is struggling.
Yeah.
I have friends that come up and say, oh, I hear your business is just really bad. And you're like, what? No, they're like, but we hear it every single weekend. You never hear the great stories that come, the final box office that comes. You have a movie like ours, like Sonic 3, it's the biggest in the franchise. How many times do you get number 3 to be the biggest in the franchise? Right? And you never get these stories. So I do think that that's one of the issues that we have, is messaging out just to the general public.
Yeah, there's no question. I've spent my entire professional career in Washington, D.C., which is I had thought was one of the most cynical places on earth, and then I was in LA for a week, and but so how do we? Yeah, so
that myth is out the door.
Yeah, so how do we change that narrative? Because it is real, it is a problem. Even when a movie does well, the first paragraph is how the movie did well. The second paragraph is it's a much needed shot in the arm for an industry that's dying. So
and
even when you win, you lose.
And by the way, sometimes that negative narrative starts 3 weeks out, the day you come on tracking. So all of a sudden they're talking life of the movie industry. It's crazy because the clickbaity press wants to absolutely beat out somebody else that might write them 2 minutes before them, so they have to fill in the blank with the absence of real knowledge, real information. They just make it up. And that doesn't help anyone. And you just sit there and go, what is the benefit? Who are you talking to? But of course, the provocative headlines are what people talk about.
But it's not, and then not only that, when you have a great success, the first line is, oh, it opened whatever, 90 million. Oh, but it cost 250 million, so they're not going to do well. And you're like,
oh, wait. It opened to 90, but industry pundits thought it would open to 110.
Right.
So you just sit there and go, really? Open to 90. Frustrating.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Tim, you've done a great job of, I think, promoting going to the theater, and I suspect that in Europe, the cynicism, perhaps not on par with places here, but how have you dealt with it?
Well, I think each and every one of us plays a part in that. We have to change the narrative on our industry, and we all have a part in it. And I mean, I was sitting down with a potential investor who's kind of made a cold call recently, a big brand name, and they like to call themselves contrarian investors. And I kind of said, dude, you're too late. Like, we're back. And I think, I mean, that kind of sentiment, we just need to get out, you know, and we all have to do that. Every time you speak to the press, even friends, colleagues, it has to be positive.
No, I'll just like to add, you know, that in general, the industry press has to be very domestic-centric. And I think that gives an incomplete and sometimes distorted view of the whole picture. And I, just as an example, you know, when Mufasa came out, the industry press focused a lot on the fact that it was, you know, 35 million versus, you know, Sonic doing 60. But they didn't look at the whole run, you know, and they didn't look also at the opening weekend. Internationally, it had done 87 million. So together, it had done 122 million, which is not bad at all. And when you look, but that initial report taints, you know, the perception of the movie's performance. Even though, you know, domestically, you know, people think of like Wicked being such a humongous success. Well, globally, it only did 3% more than Mufasa. Globally, you know, 744 million versus 720 million. So it's only a 3% difference, yet the perception is completely different because, of course, Mufasa did 65% internationally and 35% domestic, and Wicked was exactly the opposite. It did 64% domestically and 36% internationally. So I think we need, you know, as members of this industry to focus on global results and not only domestic, because it distorts the picture.
Well, especially as we release, you know, we don't always release day and date, right? You know, we'll have staggered releases, and, you know, there are times that, you know, you might be in 20% of the markets, and yet they're reporting, oh, internationally it only did whatever, 10 million. You're like, yeah, we're in 20% of the markets, and we've told you, but again, it's that negativity that's really permeating in the press.
So let's end, we've got about a minute and a half left. Let's end on a positive note. If you could write the headline, suppose we get together in last week of December, and you could write the headline for 2025 for this industry, what would you want it to be? Jeff?
Global box office is up 20% over the prior year with incredible movies coming into 2026.
Yeah, I think that's what we all want, right? That is the headline.
Tim, you have anything?
I'll leave that to my creative team, but I would say the recovery is on track. We're back.
Okay, Alejandro.
Likewise, I think I would love it for it to say that we're approaching pre-pandemic levels, and that for sure with the lineup that we're already seeing for 26, that's going to be the year in which we're going to go back to pre-pandemic levels, break that record, and finally stop referring to 2019 as a benchmark.
Yeah, that would be a good result.
Well, can I say one more thing?
Of course.
I think we should all make an agreement that coming out of CinemaCon that anything happened before 2020, we're not talking about anymore. You know, we're not talking about pre-whatever. It doesn't matter. It only matters what's happening tomorrow.
Right. Look to the horizon. Well, on behalf of everyone here, I want to thank Jeff, Alejandro, Tim, and Mark. This has been an amazing panel. Thank you for the time. Everybody have a great week at CinemaCon.
And a big thank you to all our colleagues and our listeners for sticking through this entire week of episodes. Long one, I said at the top of the episode, if you get to this point, email me, daniel.laurie@boxoffice.com. We'll give you a big shout out if you make it through this entire taping session. Good travels back if you're here in Vegas. If you're not, thank you for tuning in. And a huge thank you to our partners and sponsors, Tapos, a great service coming from Jackro. And we've also got Barco and our friends at Ice Theaters, which helped make this a possibility. We come back with another regularly scheduled episode next Thursday. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you again soon.